I never thought the person who shared my blood and childhood memories would look me in the eye and say, "Mom always loved me more than you, and we both know it." Yet there I was, standing in my mother's empty house after her funeral, clutching a letter that would shatter everything my sister believed about our family, a letter that had been waiting 20 years to reveal its truth. The rain pattered against the windows of Mom's Victorian home in Oakridge as Rebecca and I sorted through the remnants of our mother's life. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The funeral had been that morning, a chaudy, somber affair with more people than I expected, considering how private Mom had become in her final years. I'd flown in from Phoenix 3 days ago when the hospice nurse called to say it was time, but I'd been too late. Mom had slipped away, with only Rebecca by her side. At least she wasn't alone, I had said, trying to find something positive despite the hollow ache in my chest. Rebecca had simply nodded, that familiar look of superiority flickering across her face. She knew who she could count on to be there. Barb was subtle but sharp, Rebecca's specialty. I let it go, as I always did. There was no point arguing at our mother's bedside. Now we were alone in the house where we'd grown up, sorting through Mom's belongings with the steady tick of the grandfather clock marking time in the hallway. The same clock that had witnessed our childhood squabbles, teenage rebellions, and eventual diverging paths, mine leading west to pursue a career in environmental science, Rebecca's keeping her firmly planted in Oakridge where she could remain the dutiful daughter. "I think we should donate most of her clothes," I said, carefully folding a cashmere sweater that still held traces of Mom's gardenia perfume. "Maybe keep a few special pieces each?" Rebecca didn't respond. She was sitting at Mom's vanity, rifling through the jewelry box with methodical precision. I watched as she separated the contents into piles, a small one that I assumed would be offered to me, and a significantly larger one positioned closer to herself. "I was thinking we could split the jewelry evenly," I ventured, keeping my tone neutral. Rebecca's fingers paused over a pearl necklace. "I don't think that would be fair, do you? Considering I was the one who took care of her for the past 15 years while you were off chasing butterflies or whatever." "I was researching climate impacts on desert ecosystems," I corrected, feeling that familiar tightening in my chest. "And I came back whenever I could. Twice a year, Christmas and her birthday. Very devoted." I swallowed the defensive words rising in my throat. "I called her every Sunday. I sent her photos of my field work. She understood why I couldn't be here physically." Rebecca finally turned to look at me, her expression a mixture of pity and disdain that made me feel like I was 10 years old again, being told I wasn't holding my fork correctly. "She understood you abandoned her, yes. She accepted it because that's the kind of person she was. But don't think for a second she didn't feel it, Ellie." Rebecca's voice softened in a way that somehow made her words cut deeper. "Don't think she didn't notice who was there when she needed her prescriptions picked up, or when the furnace broke in the middle of winter, or when she couldn't remember if she'd taken her heart medication." My eyes burned. "That's not fair. I would have come back if she'd needed me. She always said she was managing fine. Because she didn't want to burden you." Rebecca sighed dramatically. "But we both know the truth. Mom always loved me more than you, and we both know it. It's why she told me about the safe deposit box and not you." The words hung in the air between us, a glass wall suddenly erected, in the middle of the room. I felt my breath catch, not just at the cruelty of what she'd said, but at the casual way she'd delivered the blow, as if stating that the sky was blue or water was wet. "A simple, indisputable fact." "What safe deposit box?" I managed, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. Rebecca's smile was small but victorious. "The one at First National with Mom's will and some family heirlooms. She gave me the key last year and made me promise not to mention it until after she was gone." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small brass key, dangling it between her fingers. "See?" She trusted me with everything important in the end. I stood frozen, trying to process this information while fighting back the hurt child inside. Me who wanted to scream that it wasn't true, that Mom had loved us equally. But hadn't I always sensed it too? The way Mom's eyes would light up a bit more when Rebecca entered a room? How she kept every certificate and trophy Rebecca ever earned, displayed prominently in the living room while my academic publications were tucked away in a drawer? "I'm heading to the bank tomorrow morning," Rebecca continued, seemingly oblivious to my internal struggle. "You can come if you want, but it's just formalities. I already know what's in there." I nodded mutely and turned back to the closet, blinking rapidly to clear my vision. That's when I saw it. A shoebox pushed far back on the top shelf, partially hidden behind winter scarves and hat boxes. Something about its placement struck me as deliberate, as if it had been tucked away with care rather than simply stored. Standing. On tiptoe, I reached for it, my fingers just barely brushing the cardboard. "What are you doing?" Rebecca asked, her attention drawn by my stretching. "There's a box up here I don't remember seeing before." Rebecca waved dismissively. "Probably. Just old photos. We can look at those later." But something pulled me toward that box. I grabbed the small step stool from beside the dresser and reached again, this time successfully pulling the shoebox down. It was lighter than I expected, and unlike everything else in Mom's meticulously maintained home, a fine layer of dust covered the lid. "Mom kept everything so clean," I murmured. "It's strange she'd leave this untouched." "She probably forgot it was there," Rebecca said, but I noticed she'd put down the jewelry and was watching me with sudden interest. I carried the box to Mom's bed and carefully removed the lid. Inside was a collection of items that at first glance seemed random: a faded blue ribbon, a small jar filled with seashells, a pressed flower, several loose photographs, and a sealed envelope with my name written on it in Mom's elegant handwriting. My heart stuttered as I picked up the envelope. It was thick, the paper high quality and cream-colored, the stationery Mom reserved for important correspondence. And it was addressed only to me. "What is that?" Rebecca asked, rising from the vanity chair, her voice sharp with sudden alarm. I turned the envelope over in my hands. "It's addressed to me. From Mom." Rebecca moved toward me with unexpected quickness. "Let me see that." I instinctively stepped back, clutching the letter to my chest. "It has my name on it, Rebecca." "It's probably just an old birthday card she forgot to give you," she said, but her eyes told a different story. They were fixed on the envelope with an intensity that sent a chill up my spine. "I don't think so," I said, noticing that the envelope was sealed with wax, another of Mom's touches reserved for truly significant communications. She'd been nearly ceremonial about her wax seal, using it only for what she called letters of consequence. This was no forgotten birthday card. Rebecca's face had lost its composed veneer. "You need to give that to me. As executor?" "As what?" I interrupted, suddenly alert. "Mom didn't have a will. You said we needed to go to the bank tomorrow to get it." A flash of something, panic, frustration, crossed Rebecca's face before she schooled her features back into neutral. But it was too late. I'd seen it. "I meant as the person who was actually here for her," she recovered, holding out her hand. "Whatever it is, it should be discussed between us before you read it." But as I looked down at my name inscribed in my mother's handwriting, at the carefully pressed wax seal, I knew with sudden clarity that this letter was meant for my eyes alone. And something about Rebecca's reaction told me it contained truths she didn't want revealed. "I think I'll read it first," I said quietly, feeling a strange calm settle over me. "Then we can discuss it." Rebecca's face hardened, the mask of sisterly concern dropping entirely. "You always were selfish, Ellie. Even now you can't think about anyone but yourself." But her words didn't sting as they usually did, because I was holding something Mom had deliberately hidden and specifically addressed to me. Something important. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Enough to protect with a wax seal and conceal from the sister who claimed she'd been told everything. I slipped the envelope into my pocket, my mind racing. What secrets could be so important that Mom had tucked them away where only I might find them? And what would they reveal about the mother I thought I knew and the sister who claimed to know her better? The tension between Rebecca and me wasn't new. It had been the background radiation of our relationship for as long as I could remember. Even as children, we had been more like opposites than sisters. Rebecca the perfectionist who excelled at everything she touched, me the dreamer who found solace in books and the natural world. Our childhood home in Oakridge had been a battleground of subtle competitions. Rebecca's straight A's to my B+s, her ballet recitals where she always secured the spotlight role to my place in the corps, her immaculate bedroom across the hall from my creative chaos, as Mom charitably called it. But Mom had been the sun around which we both orbited, each in our own way seeking her warmth and approval. "I'm going to make some tea," I said, needing distance from Rebecca's piercing gaze. I tucked the letter deeper into my pocket, feeling its weight against my thigh as I headed downstairs. The kitchen was exactly as Mom had always kept it. Copper pots hanging above the island, ceramic canisters of flour and sugar lined up by size, the antique tea set ready on its tray by the stove. Mom had been nothing if not prepared. The thought made me smile despite everything, remembering how she'd scoff at Rebecca's over-planning, while simultaneously keeping her pantry stocked for any possible natural disaster. I filled the kettle and set it on the stove, the familiar routine grounding me. As I waited for the water to boil, I gazed out the window at Mom's garden. The spring blooms were pushing through the soil, crocuses and daffodils that she'd planted each fall with meticulous care, marking their locations on a hand-drawn map. She kept in her garden journal. Mom had loved beautiful things, her garden, her antique furniture, the art on her walls. But she'd never been showy about it. Unlike Rebecca, who drove a Mercedes and dressed exclusively in designer labels, Mom had found beauty in simplicity and history. The chipped teacup she refused to throw out because it had been her grandmother's, the faded quilt on her bed that she'd patch rather than replace. The kettle whistled, pulling me from my thoughts. I made 2 cups of Earl Grey, Rebecca's favorite, a peace offering of sorts. When I returned to the bedroom, she was sitting primly on the edge of the bed, scrolling through her phone. "I made tea," I said, offering her a cup. She accepted it, with a nod but didn't drink. "I've been thinking," she said, placing the cup on the nightstand. "We should go through Mom's financial papers together, tonight." I sat in the armchair by the window, blowing on my tea. "I thought you said everything was at the bank." "The will is. But I'm sure there are bills and accounts we need to address." She wasn't meeting my eyes. "Better to do it now while we're both here." Something about her urgency struck me as odd. "The funeral was just this morning, Beck. Maybe we could take a day to breathe?" The childhood nickname slipped out unintentionally, a reminder of simpler times when she was just my big sister who knew how to French braid my hair and sneak cookies from the jar without Mom hearing. A flicker of softness crossed her face before disappearing. "There's no point in delaying the inevitable. Besides, don't you need to get back to your precious desert?" And just like that, we were back to our established roles. Rebecca, the responsible one. Me, the flighty sister who couldn't be counted on. "I took a leave of absence," I said. "I can stay as long as needed." Surprise registered in her expression. "You never mentioned that." "You never asked." We lapsed into silence, each sipping our tea. Outside, the rain had stopped, and late afternoon. Sunlight broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the bedroom floor. For a moment, I could almost pretend we were teenagers again, sharing a quiet moment before dinner. "Do you remember when Mom would make Sunday roasts?" I asked, chasing the thread of nostalgia. Rebecca's lips curved slightly. "And Dad would carve the meat while wearing that ridiculous apron." "Kiss the chef," we said in unison. then shared a look of startled amusement at our synchronicity. Dad had been gone for 15 years, a heart attack at 52 that had left Mom a widow and changed our family forever. After his death, the fault lines between Rebecca and me had deepened. She had stayed, moving into an apartment just 3 blocks from Mom's house, while I had fled to college and then graduate school, returning home only for holidays and brief visits. She was never the same after he died, Rebecca said, a rare moment of vulnerability in her voice. I nodded, feeling the familiar weight of grief. None of us were. Rebecca stood suddenly, brushing invisible lint from her black dress. Well, wallowing won't get these papers sorted. I'll check her study. And just like that, the moment was gone. Rebecca strode from the room, perfect posture and determined steps radiating purpose. I remained in the chair, my hand drifting to my pocket where the letter waited. What had Mom wanted to tell me? And why had she hidden it instead of giving it to me directly? My mind drifted back to our last conversation, 2 months ago during my Christmas visit. Mom had seemed more tired than usual, but had insisted on cooking a full holiday dinner despite my offers to help. Rebecca had bustled around the kitchen, rearranging dishes and correcting Mom's seasoning when she thought no one was looking. Your sister means well, Mom had said later, when we were alone in the living room. She'd been watching the lights on the Christmas tree, her expression thoughtful. She always has. Something in her tone had made me look at her more closely. But Mom had patted my hand. But sometimes people can convince themselves of things that aren't true, if they need them badly enough. Before I could ask what she meant, Rebecca had returned with coffee, and the moment had passed. But now I wondered if Mom had been trying to tell me something important. The sound of drawers opening and closing in the study pulled me back to the present. Whatever Rebecca was looking for, she was determined to find it. And whatever Mom had written in my letter, Rebecca seemed equally determined to prevent me from reading it alone. I rose from the chair, decision made. I would need privacy to read Mom's letter, and I wouldn't find it here with Rebecca rummaging through the house. I grabbed my coat and purse from the bed where I'd tossed them earlier, then paused at Mom's vanity. The pearl necklace Rebecca had been handling earlier, Mom's favorite, worn to every special occasion, lay in the Rebecca pile. Without overthinking, I picked it up and slipped it into my pocket alongside the letter. Then I quietly made my way downstairs and out the front, far into the gathering dusk. I would read Mom's words alone, as she had intended, and tomorrow I would face whatever truth they contained, and whatever that meant for the story Rebecca had always told about our family. The Oakridge Inn was exactly as I remembered it. A Victorian conversion with creaky floors and floral wallpaper that somehow managed to be both outdated and charming. I'd booked a room without hesitation, knowing Rebecca would be furious when she discovered I'd left with the letter. My phone had already buzzed with 5 missed calls by the time I'd checked, and now, sitting on the edge of the queen bed with its surprisingly luxurious duvet, I held Mom's letter in trembling hands. The wax seal, an intricate M for Margaret, was intact, the same deep burgundy color she'd used since I was a child. I ran my thumb over it, remembering how she'd let me help press the seal into the hot wax on special occasions, guiding my small hand with her steady one. "What were you trying to tell me, Mom?" I whispered to the empty room. Before I could lose my nerve, I carefully broke the seal and opened the envelope. Inside were several folded sheets of Mom's cream stationery, and what appeared to be photocopies of official documents. I unfolded the letter first, recognizing Mom's elegant handwriting immediately. "My dearest Eleanor, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've found the box where I hid this letter. I've always known you were the one who would find it. Rebecca would never notice something tucked away in a corner. She's always been too focused on what's directly in front of her to see what lies in the shadows. There are things I need to tell you, truths I've kept hidden far too long. I've tried many times over the years to find the courage to have this conversation in person, but my cowardice prevailed. Perhaps writing these words is another form of cowardice, but I hope you'll forgive an old woman her failings. First, I need you to know that I have loved both you and your sister equally, though differently. Rebecca needed more from me, more reassurance, more attention, more proof of my affection. You were always more self-sufficient, finding joy in the world around you rather than seeking it from others. I worried less about you, which Rebecca interpreted as loving you less. Nothing could be further from the truth. I paused, a lump forming in my throat. Mom had understood more than I'd realized. I wiped away a tear and continued reading. What I'm about to tell you will be difficult to hear, and even more difficult to share with Rebecca, but it's necessary. The truth is that Rebecca is not your full sister. She is your half-sister. Her biological father was not your father, but a man I knew before I met James. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at the page, certain I'd misread, but the words remained unchanged. Rebecca, not my full sister? The idea was so foreign I couldn't immediately process it. Rebecca's biological father was named Thomas Lawson. He and I were engaged when I was 22 before I met your father. Thomas was charming, sophisticated, and, as I would later discover, deeply troubled. When I learned I was pregnant, he was initially excited, but as my pregnancy progressed, his behavior became erratic. He would disappear for days, returning with grandiose stories and gifts he couldn't afford. 2 weeks before Rebecca was born, Thomas left for what he claimed was a business trip. I never saw him again. Later, I learned he had suffered from untreated bipolar disorder and had experienced a severe manic episode. He died in a car accident in California 3 years later, having never met his daughter. I was alone with a newborn when I met your father. James was kind, stable, and fell in love not just with me, but with Rebecca as well. We married when Rebecca was 18 months old, and he legally adopted her. We agreed never to tell her about Thomas. James was her father in every way that mattered, and we saw no reason to complicate her life with the truth about a man who had abandoned us both. You were born 2 years later, the biological child of both James and me. From the moment Rebecca saw you, she appointed herself your protector and guide. She was so proud to be your big sister. My mind was reeling. Dad, the man I'd known as Dad, wasn't Rebecca's biological father. The revelation reframed our entire childhood in an instant. Rebecca's intense competitiveness, her desperate need for approval, her possessiveness over Mom after Dad died, it all took on new meaning. We might have kept this secret forever, but when James died, something changed. In Rebecca, her grief manifested as an almost obsessive desire to be acknowledged as James's real daughter. She began to compete with you in ways that concerned me, claiming exclusive memories with him, insisting she was more like him than you were. I believe, on some unconscious level, she sensed the truth and was fighting against it. The enclosed documents are Rebecca's original birth certificate with Thomas listed as her father, the adoption papers James filed, and a few photographs of Thomas that I've kept hidden all these years. There's also a letter James wrote to Rebecca on her 18th birthday, which he asked me to give her if the truth ever came out. I was too much of a coward to do it while I lived, so I'm entrusting it to you now. Eleanor, my practical, compassionate daughter, I'm placing an impossible burden on your shoulders. Rebecca may never forgive me, or you, for revealing this truth. But I've watched her build her entire identity around being James Sullivan's daughter, around being your full sister, around being more devoted to our family than you. It's a foundation built on quicksand, and I fear what will happen when it inevitably collapses. I don't know what the right thing to do is. Perhaps it would be kinder to let her continue believing what she's always believed. But secrets have a way of surfacing eventually, and I'd rather she learn this from family than from a random DNA test or medical record. Whatever you decide, know that I love you both with every fiber of my being. You've been the greatest joys of my life, And any good I've done in this world is reflected in the women you've become. All my love. Mom, I set the letter down, my hands shaking so badly the pages rustled. The room seemed to tilt around me as I tried to absorb what I'd just learned. Rebecca wasn't my full sister. The man I'd called Dad wasn't her biological father. Mom had kept this secret for over 40 years. I picked up the documents Mom had included, the birth certificate listing Thomas Lawson as the father, the adoption papers signed by Dad, and an envelope with Rebecca's name written in Dad's familiar handwriting. There were also 3 faded photographs of a handsome man with Rebecca's distinctive hazel eyes and patrician nose. Looking at the photos was like seeing Rebecca's features rearranged on a stranger's face. The resemblance was unmistakable once you knew to look for it. My phone buzzed again. A text from Rebecca. "Where are you? I know you took Mom's necklace. Call me immediately." I stared at the message, the reality of my situation sinking in. I now held a truth that would shatter my sister's entire sense of identity, a truth that explained so much about our relationship and her desperate need to prove herself the more devoted daughter. Mom had left me with an impossible choice: keep the secret and let Rebecca continue living a lie, or reveal the truth and risk destroying what fragile relationship we still had. Either way, nothing between us would ever be the same again. I couldn't sleep that night. How could I, with my world turned upside down? I lay in the unfamiliar bed at the Oakridge Inn, staring at the ceiling as memories from our childhood played through my mind like scenes from a movie I was seeing for the first time. Rebecca at my 5th birthday party, hovering beside me as I opened presents, telling everyone which ones she had helped pick out. Rebecca in middle school, joining every activity I showed interest in, then outshining me in each one. Rebecca at Dad's funeral, positioning herself between Mom and me in the receiving line, as if she had more right to stand beside our grieving mother. All those years, I'd attributed her behavior to simple sibling rivalry or personality differences. But now, looking back through the lens of Mom's revelation, everything took on new meaning. Rebecca hadn't just been a competitive sister. She'd been a child subconsciously fighting for her place in a family she somehow sensed wasn't fully hers. I picked up one of the photographs of Thomas Lawson. In this one, he stood beside a vintage car, grinning broadly in the sunshine, one hand casually propped on the vehicle's roof. He looked carefree and charismatic, nothing like our steadfast, thoughtful dad. But the shape of his smile, the angle of his cheekbones, the slight tilt of his head, it was all Rebecca. Had she ever caught Mom staring at her, seeing the ghost of this man in her daughter's features? Had Dad ever had moments of painful recognition that the child he raised as his own carried another man's imprint in her face? My phone buzzed again on the nightstand. Another text from Rebecca. "I'm filing a police report about the necklace if you don't respond by morning. This is theft, Eleanor." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the pearl necklace in my pocket. I hadn't meant to take it out of spite or to hurt Rebecca. I'd acted on instinct, wanting to preserve something of Mom that felt significant. But now it seemed like a childish gesture that only complicated an already impossible situation. I texted back, "Not theft, just needed space to think. We'll bring it back tomorrow. We need to talk." Her response was immediate. "Where are you?" "I'm coming now." "No," I wrote firmly. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. at Mom's house. Please respect that I need tonight alone." There was no reply, but I knew she'd received the message. Whether she'd honor my request was another matter entirely. I got up and pulled Mom's letter from my bag, rereading passages that stood out to me, looking for clues I might have missed the first time. One section in particular caught my attention. After, "Your father died," Rebecca began insisting on accompanying me to all my doctor's appointments and financial meetings. At first, I appreciated her concern, but gradually I realized she was systematically positioning herself as my primary caregiver and decision-maker. When I tried to include you in these matters, she would remind me, and anyone else listening, that you had chosen to leave while she had stayed. As if your scientific work was a rejection of family rather than a pursuit of your passion. What troubled me most was watching her rewrite our family history, claiming special bonds with your father that excluded you. Once, at a neighborhood gathering, I overheard her telling Mrs. Abernathy that she had been Daddy's girl and that you had always been Mom's favorite. It was a complete inversion of reality. Your father had adored you both, but he'd had a special connection with you over your shared love of nature and science. I remembered that neighborhood gathering. I'd flown in for the weekend to celebrate Mom's 70th birthday. Rebecca had barely acknowledged my presence, spending the entire party networking with Mom's friends and positioning herself as the devoted daughter who'd sacrificed so much to remain close to home. I'd written it off as Rebecca being Rebecca, always needing to be the center of attention, always positioning herself as the martyr. But what if it had been more than that? What if, on some level, Rebecca had been trying to secure her place in a family she subconsciously feared wasn't really hers? My thoughts drifted back to a particular Christmas when we were teenagers. Dad had given Rebecca a delicate gold locket with our family crest engraved on it, a tradition for the Sullivan women when they turned 16. Rebecca had been ecstatic, wearing it constantly, often touching it while talking about being a true Sullivan. Later that night, I'd found Mom crying in the kitchen. When I asked what was wrong, she'd quickly wiped her eyes and said, "Nothing, sweetheart, just feeling sentimental." At the time, I'd assumed she was emotional about Rebecca growing up. Now, I wondered if she'd been crying because of the painful irony. Rebecca treasuring a family crest that wasn't biologically hers, while Mom and Dad maintained their decades-long deception. Another memory surfaced, Rebecca at 24, showing me, Mom and me, an elaborate family tree she'd created for a genealogy class. She'd spent months researching Dad's Irish ancestors, tracing the Sullivan line back 5 generations. She'd been so proud of the project, talking about her Sullivan blood and how she felt connected to Ireland because of it. Mom had been unusually quiet that day. When Rebecca left, I'd commented on how thorough the research was, and Mom had simply said, "She's always needed to belong." Those 4 words contained volumes I hadn't understood until now. I took out my laptop and, acting on a hunch, searched for information about Thomas Lawson. It didn't take long to find him, a minor but promising sculptor in the 1970s New York art scene, whose career had been cut short by his death at 29. There were a few articles about exhibitions he'd participated in, mentions of his turbulent but brilliant artistic temperament, and finally, a small obituary noting his death in a single-car accident in Big Sur, California. What struck me most was an image of one of his sculptures, a bronze piece titled "Fractured Identity" that featured a human form split down the middle, reaching toward itself. The museum caption noted Lawson's preoccupation with duality and the struggle for wholeness. Rebecca had majored in art history. In our parents' basement, wrapped carefully in acid-free paper, was her senior thesis on duality in modern American sculpture. Had she somehow been drawn to her biological father's artistic world without even knowing it? The interconnections were too specific to be coincidence. Did genes carry not just physical traits, but interests, obsessions, ways of seeing the world? Had Rebecca been searching for her true self all these years without realizing what she was looking for? I closed my laptop and returned to the bed, wrapping myself in the duvet despite the room's comfortable temperature. Outside, the rain had returned, pattering against the window in an irregular rhythm. Tomorrow, I would face Rebecca. Tomorrow, I would have to decide whether to show her the letter that would simultaneously answer questions she'd never asked and destroy the foundation of her identity. Everything suddenly made sense. Her desperate need for Mom's approval, her competitiveness. With me, her obsession with the Sullivan family history. But understanding the pattern didn't make my choice any easier. Would the truth set her free, or would it break her completely? Morning arrived with soft golden light filtering through the inn's lace curtains. I'd managed perhaps 3 hours of fitful sleep, my dreams filled with fractured images, Rebecca as a child, crying at the edge of a playground, Mom sealing an envelope with burgundy wax, her hands trembling, Dad standing between 2 doors, unable to choose which to open. I showered and dressed mechanically, my mind still churning with the impossible decision that lay ahead. By 9, I was sitting in the inn's small breakfast room, a cup of untouched coffee cooling before me. The elderly couple at the next table chatted cheerfully about their grandchildren's upcoming visit, their easy contentment a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. What was the right thing to do? Mom had left the decision to me, but was that fair? This wasn't my secret to keep or reveal. Yet here I was, the reluctant keeper of a truth that could either heal or destroy my sister. If I showed Rebecca the letter, I risked shattering her entire sense of self. The identity she'd built, as Dad's daughter, as Mom's primary caretaker, as the real Sullivan, would collapse. The very foundation of who she believed herself to be would crack beneath her feet. But if I kept the secret, I'd be perpetuating a lie that had already distorted our family dynamics for decades. Rebecca would continue living in a reality that wasn't true, building her life on misconceptions about her origins and identity, and I would become complicit in the very deception that had caused so much unspoken pain in our family. My phone buzzed, with a text from Rebecca. "I expect you at 10 sharp. We have legal matters to discuss." Legal matters. Of course, that would be her focus, establishing control, asserting authority. If she only knew how meaningless those legal matters might become, in the face of what I now knew. I paid for my untouched breakfast and walked out into the crisp spring morning. Oakridge was quiet on Sunday mornings, the downtown streets nearly empty as I made my way toward Mom's house. I took the long route through Palmer Park, where Rebecca and I had played as children, she on the organized playground equipment, me exploring the small wooded area at the park's edge. Near the center of the park stood an ancient oak tree, its massive trunk scarred with decades of carved initials and declarations. Rebecca and I had added our own marks one summer afternoon when I was 8 and she was 10. R+E sisters forever, she had carefully carved while I kept watch for park rangers. I'd been so proud that day, basking in the rare glow of my big sister's undivided attention. I found myself walking toward the tree now, wondering if our carving still existed after all these years. It took several minutes of searching the weathered bark before I found it, fainter now, the edges softened by time, but still legible. R+E sisters forever. We were still sisters. Different fathers didn't change that fundamental truth. We shared a mother, a childhood, a history no one else on earth had experienced. Whatever happened next, that connection couldn't be entirely severed. But would Rebecca see it that way? Or would she feel that one more piece of her identity, being my full sister, had been taken from her? I traced the carved letters with my fingertips, remembering Rebecca's look of fierce concentration as she worked the pocket knife Dad had given her for her birthday. "There," she had said when finished. "Now everyone will know we're sisters. Even when we're 100 years old and this tree is twice as big." Why would anyone care if we're sisters? I had asked, practical even then. Rebecca had looked at me with rare earnestness. Because being sisters is special. It means we'll always have each other, no matter what. The memory brought tears to my eyes. When had we lost that? When had sisters forever transformed into competition and resentment? Had it been gradual, or had there been a specific moment when something broke between us? My phone buzzed again. "Where are you? It's 9:45. I wiped my eyes and texted back, "On my way. Be there in 10. As I walked the remaining blocks to Mom's house, I tried to imagine every possible scenario for how this could unfold. I could show Rebecca the letter immediately, ripping the Band-Aid off in one swift, painful motion. I could ease into it, perhaps starting with general conversation about Mom and Dad's relationship before gradually introducing the truth. I could hide the letter entirely, inventing some excuse for why I'd taken it. None of the options felt right. By the time I reached Mom's front porch, my heart was pounding so loudly I was sure Rebecca would hear it through the door. The pearl necklace felt heavy in my pocket, a small piece of Mom I'd taken selfishly, now serving as an uncomfortable reminder of how easily objects and symbols could be claimed, but how complicated the truth could be. Before I could knock, the door swung open. Rebecca stood in the entryway, impeccably dressed in a charcoal pencil skirt and cream blouse despite it being Sunday morning. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, her makeup flawless, but the dark circles under her eyes told me she'd slept, as poorly as I had. "Finally," she said, stepping aside to let me in. "I've been calling lawyers all morning." I entered slowly, the familiar scent of Mom's house, lemon furniture polish and the faint sweetness of the potpourri she kept in crystal dishes throughout the downstairs, enveloping me. "Why are you calling lawyers?" I asked, following her to the living room where papers were spread across the coffee table. "Because we need to discuss what you've done," Rebecca replied, her voice clipped. "Taking Mom's necklace, disappearing with what could be important family documents, refusing to participate in settling her affairs properly. It's completely unacceptable, Ellie." I sat on the edge of Mom's favorite armchair, suddenly exhausted. "I have the necklace. I'll give it back. I just needed some time to process everything." Rebecca remained standing, arms crossed. "Process. What, exactly? The fact that Mom died? Because I've been processing that for months while you were off playing in the sand." The familiar jab about my work should have stung, but instead, it filled me with a strange sadness. How many of her barbs over the years had been fueled by her unconscious insecurity about her place in our family? "I wasn't playing in the sand," I said quietly. "I was studying the impact of climate change on desert ecosystems. It's important. Work. More important than being here for your mother in her final days?" Her voice cracked slightly. "More important than family?" The raw pain in her question caught me off guard. Behind her anger, I glimpsed the frightened child who had always feared being abandoned, first by a father she never knew existed, then by me when I moved away, now by Mom in the most permanent way possible. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the pearl necklace, holding it out to her. "I shouldn't have taken this. I'm sorry." She stared at the necklace but didn't take it. "Why did you?" she asked. And for once, her voice held genuine confusion rather than accusation. I swallowed hard. "I guess I wanted to hold on to something of Mom's that mattered to her, something that connected me to her." Rebecca's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "She wore that to my college graduation, and to your doctoral ceremony." I nodded. "And to every Christmas dinner, and when she testified before the town council to save the old library building." A ghost of a smile touched Rebecca's lips. "She was so nervous that day. Do you remember how she kept touching the pearls while she spoke?" "Like they gave her courage," I said. For a brief moment, we were just two daughters remembering their mother with love. Then Rebecca's expression hardened again, the wall between us rebuilding itself. "What was in the letter, Ellie? What was so important that you had to run away with it?" The question hung in the air between us. The moment of decision had arrived, and I was no more certain of the right path than I had been the night before. "Rebecca," I said slowly, "maybe we should sit down." Rebecca stood motionless, studying my face with the same penetrating gaze she'd perfected as a teenager, the one that always made me feel like she could see straight through any lie I might try to tell. "Why do we need to sit down?" she asked, her voice steady but with an undercurrent of apprehension. What exactly is in that letter, Ellie? I placed the pearl necklace on the coffee table between us. Please, Rebecca. This isn't a conversation we should have standing in the living room. Something in my tone must have reached her because she slowly sank onto the sofa, her back ramrod straight, hands folded precisely in her lap. The portrait of composure, except for the slight tremor in her fingers that only someone who had known her all her life would notice. I sat across from her, the letter still in my jacket pocket, its presence almost burning against my side. Through the bay window behind Rebecca, I could see Mom's garden coming alive with spring growth, daffodils nodding in the breeze, the cherry tree beginning to blossom. Mom would never see this spring's blooms, never deadhead the roses or divide the hostas as she did every May. Mom left me a letter, I began, watching Rebecca's expression carefully. She hid it in that shoebox, knowing I would be the one to find it. Rebecca's lips thinned. Of course she did. Another example of your special connection that supposedly existed only in my imagination. The bitterness in her voice made me hesitate. Was I about to destroy whatever fragile thread still connected us? But the alternative, continuing the deception that had warped our relationship for decades, suddenly seemed more destructive in the long run. Rebecca, what the letter contains is going to be difficult to hear, I said, choosing my words with care. But I think Mom was right that you deserve to know the truth even if it's painful. Fear flashed across her face before she masked it with annoyance. Stop being dramatic and just tell me what it says. I took a deep breath. The letter is about our father, about Dad. Rebecca sat perfectly still, but her knuckles whitened as she clasped her hands more tightly together. What about him? In that moment, looking at my sister's face, the face that now I could clearly see resembled a man in those old photographs more than it had ever resembled our dad. A sudden clarity washed over me. This wasn't just about genetics or biology or who had which father. This was about a lifetime of Rebecca trying to secure her place in a family where she had always, somehow, felt like an outsider. Every competition, every attempt to prove she was the better daughter, every claim that Mom loved her more. They hadn't been acts of malice but desperate attempts at self-preservation. And in that moment of clarity, I knew what I had to do. The letter explains why Mom was so protective of Dad's memory after he died, I said, my heart pounding as I veered away from the direct truth. She wanted us to know how much he loved us both, even though he sometimes struggled to show it. Rebecca's shoulders relaxed almost imperceptibly. That's it? That's what you ran off with? I nodded, the lie sticking in my throat. Mom wanted us to know that Dad had his own childhood trauma that made it hard for him to express affection sometimes, especially to you because you reminded him so much of himself. Rebecca blinked, processing this. What do you mean? Dad's father was very critical of him, never satisfied with his achievements, I continued, weaving truth with fiction. Mom wrote that he was determined to be a better father, but sometimes his own insecurities made him hold back, especially with you because he saw himself in you and was afraid of influencing you with his own self-doubt. A look of wonder crossed Rebecca's face. I always thought he was closer to you. He wasn't, I said softly. He just found it easier to connect over concrete things like science projects. With you, it was more complicated because your relationship mirrored his own difficult relationship with his father. Rebecca looked away, her profile sharp against the window light. Why wouldn't Mom tell us this while she was alive? Why hide it in a letter for you to find? She wrote that she'd tried to tell us many times over the years, but Dad had asked her not to. He was ashamed of his inability to show affection more openly. After he died, she felt like she was betraying him by revealing his private struggles. Rebecca was quiet for so long I thought she might have seen through my improvised story. When she finally spoke, Her voice was uncharacteristically hesitant. "There was this one time when I was about 14, she said slowly, when Dad came to my room after we'd had an argument about my curfew. He sat on the edge of my bed and started to say something, then stopped. He just patted my hand and said, 'You're a good kid, Becca.' Then he left. I always wondered what he'd been about to say." My heart ached at the memory, at the lost opportunity for honesty, at the decades of misunderstanding that had followed. "I think he wanted to explain why he was so strict with you," I said gently. "Mom wrote that he worried constantly about making the same mistakes his father had made with him." Rebecca reached for the pearl necklace on the coffee table, running her fingers over the smooth spheres. "And she left this letter just for you to find? Not addressed to both of us?" Here was the trap in my improvised story. I hesitated, then decided to stay as close to the truth as possible. "She addressed it to me because she knew I would find it. She wrote that you were too focused on the practical details, the legal documents, the financial arrangements, to notice a shoebox tucked away on a shelf." To my surprise, Rebecca laughed softly. "She wasn't wrong. I've been so busy with the will and the house that I've barely looked at her personal things." She met my eyes. "Is that why you took the letter and ran? Because you thought I'd be angry it wasn't addressed to both of us?" I nodded, relieved to have a plausible explanation. "I was afraid you'd see it as another example of Mom favoring me, when it wasn't that at all. She knew I would find it because I'm the one who always notices the things tucked away in corners." Rebecca was quiet again, processing. Then she said, "Can I read it?" The question I'd been dreading. I reached into my pocket, my fingers brushing against Mom's actual letter, the one containing the truth about Rebecca's biological father. "Mom asked me not to show you the original," I said, the lies coming more easily now that I'd committed to this path. "She wrote some personal things about Dad that she thought might hurt you unnecessarily. But I can tell you everything relevant that's in it." Rebecca's face hardened slightly. "So I'm just supposed to take your word for what it says?" I met her gaze steadily. "Yes, Rebecca. Just like I've taken your word about what's in the safe deposit box that supposedly only you have access to." She had the grace to look slightly abashed. "That's different, is it?" I countered. "We're both trying to honor our parents' wishes while navigating what they left behind. Can we agree to trust each other? At least a little bit?" Rebecca studied me for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "I suppose we can try." As the tension between us eased marginally, I wondered if I'd made the right choice. I had chosen to protect Rebecca from a truth that would have shattered her, but in doing so, I'd perpetuated the very pattern of secrets and half-truths that had damaged our relationship in the first place. Yet looking at my sister's face, seeing the slight softening around her eyes, the way her shoulders had lost some of their rigidity, I couldn't regret my decision. Some truths were too destructive, some revelations too devastating. Maybe someday I would find the right moment to share the full truth, but not today, when we were both raw with grief and the foundation of our relationship was already so fragile. "There is one more thing Mom mentioned in the letter," I said, deciding to offer a different truth in place of the one I was withholding. "Something I think you should know." Rebecca tensed again. "What?" "She wrote that she never loved either of us more than the other. That she was immensely proud of both her daughters, even when we made choices she didn't understand." Something flickered in Rebecca's eyes. Doubt, hope, maybe both. "She wrote that? Specifically?" I nodded, thinking of the actual line in Mom's letter. "I need you to know that I have loved both you and your sister equally, though differently." "She did," I confirmed. "She loved us both, Rebecca. Equally, though differently." The tentative peace between Rebecca and me lasted approximately 23 minutes. We were in the kitchen making coffee, a mundane activity that felt almost normal, when Rebecca's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, then excused herself to take the call in the hallway. I could hear only her side of the conversation, but it was enough to understand that something had shifted. Yes, she's here now. No, not yet. But we'll go first thing tomorrow. Of course I'm still executor. No, that won't be necessary. When she returned, her expression had hardened again. The brief vulnerability I'd glimpsed earlier tucked away behind her professional mask. That was Richard Hoffman, she said, referring to Mom's longtime attorney. He was surprised to hear we haven't been to the bank yet. Apparently, there are time-sensitive matters that need to be addressed. I handed her a mug of coffee. We can go tomorrow, like you told him. Rebecca took the mug but didn't drink. He also mentioned something interesting. He said Mom amended her will 6 months ago. A chill ran through me. Did he say how? No. Rebecca's eyes narrowed slightly. But he seemed to think you might already know about it. The implication was clear. Rebecca suspected I knew something she didn't, that Mom had confided in me about changes to her will. Another perceived betrayal, another reason for Rebecca to feel excluded. I don't know anything about it, I said truthfully. Mom never discussed her will with me. Rebecca made a non-committal sound and moved toward the dining room where she'd left her briefcase. Well, we'll find out tomorrow. I've arranged for us to meet with Richard at 9, then go to the bank afterward. I followed her, unease growing in the pit of my stomach. What had Mom done? Had she left some instruction or document that would reveal the truth I'd just decided to conceal? Rebecca was pulling papers from her briefcase, organizing them with military precision on the dining table. In the meantime, we should go through these. Mom's financial records, utility accounts, insurance policies. Everything needs to be transferred or closed. I recognized the activity for what it was. Rebecca retreating to her comfort zone of practical details and paperwork, where emotions could be neatly filed away and complex feelings reduced to actionable items on a checklist. Rebecca, I said, gently, maybe we could take a break from the paperwork? We could look through some photo albums or just talk about Mom. She didn't look up. There will be plenty of time for reminiscing after we've handled the practical matters. But some of us don't have the luxury of putting our lives on hold indefinitely, Ellie, she cut in, her tone clipped. I have clients waiting, cases that need my attention. The sooner we settle Mom's affairs, the sooner we can both get back to our lives. I bit back a retort about how my research was just as important as her legal cases. Fighting would only push us further apart when we'd just taken a small step toward understanding each other. All right, I conceded, sitting across from her. What do you need me to do? For the next hour, we worked in relative silence, sorting through the administrative detritus of a life ended. Utility bills to be closed, subscriptions to cancel. Thank you. Notes to write to those who had sent flowers or prepared food for the funeral reception. It was methodical, impersonal work, and I found myself grateful for the distraction. Each completed task was one less thing to worry about, one step closer to whatever new normal awaited us after this liminal period of grief and paperwork. The doorbell interrupted our workflow. Rebecca frowned, checking her watch. I'm not expecting anyone. She went to answer the door while I continued sorting through a stack of condolence cards. A moment later, I heard a male voice in the hallway, followed by Rebecca's more measured tones. Then they were entering the dining room, Rebecca looking distinctly uncomfortable, followed by a tall man in his 60s with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Eleanor, Rebecca said stiffly, this is Dr. Philip Garner. He was Mom's oncologist. I stood to shake his hand, puzzled by his presence. It's nice to meet you, though I wish it were under different circumstances. Dr. Garner nodded, his expression somber. I was very fond of your mother. She was a remarkable woman. Dr. Garner stopped by to offer his condolences in person, Rebecca explained. though something in her tone suggested there was more to the visit. "Actually," he said, "I came because Margaret, your mother, asked me to check in with both her daughters after she was gone. She was concerned about how you would handle things between yourselves." Rebecca's posture stiffened. "I'm not sure what you mean." Dr. Garner glanced between us, clearly sensing the tension. "Margaret shared some concerns during her treatment. Cancer has a way of bringing important matters into focus, making people confront things they've avoided for years." My heartbeat quickened. Had Mom told her doctor about Rebecca's biological father? Had she enlisted him to ensure the truth came out? "What kind of concerns?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Dr. Garner sighed. She was worried that her illness and death might drive a deeper wedge between her daughters, rather than bringing them together. She spoke often about how differently you two processed emotions, how you had different approaches to almost everything. Rebecca folded her arms. "I'm not sure this is an appropriate conversation to be having, Dr. Garner. Our family dynamics are private." He nodded, unperturbed by her coolness. "I understand. But Margaret made me promise to deliver a message to both of you together." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope, not Mom's cream stationery this time, but a standard white business envelope with both our names written on the front. I glanced at Rebecca, whose face had paled slightly. "She asked me to give you this after she was gone," Dr. Garner continued, "and to tell you both that whatever is in her safe deposit box and whatever changes she made to her will, her greatest hope was that her daughters would find a way to be not just sisters, but friends." He placed the envelope on the table between us. "I'll leave you to read it privately. Margaret was a special person who touched many lives, including mine. I hope you both find peace with her passing and with each other." With that, he shook our hands again and showed himself out, leaving Rebecca and me staring at the envelope on the table. "Did you know about this?" Rebecca demanded once the front door closed. I shook my head. "I had no idea." Rebecca picked up the envelope, turning it over in her hands much as I had done with Mom's letter the night before. "What game was she playing? First a letter hidden for you to find, now this delivered by her doctor?" "Maybe she wasn't playing games," I suggested quietly. "Maybe she was trying to reach us in the ways she thought would work." Rebecca's fingers trembled slightly as she broke the seal and removed a single sheet of paper. She unfolded it and began to read aloud. "My darling daughters, if you're reading this, then Dr. Garner has fulfilled his promise to me, and I am gone. I've asked him to deliver this note because I know how differently you each handle grief. Rebecca by diving into practical matters, Eleanor by seeking emotional connection. Neither approach is wrong, they're just different, as you two have always been. I've left instructions in my will and in the safe deposit box that may surprise you both. Before you see those documents, I want you to know that every decision I've made has been with the hope of healing the divide between you. You are more alike than either of you realizes, both stubborn, both loyal, both desperately afraid of being left behind. Rebecca, you have been my rock, my practical, dependable daughter who sacrificed so much to stay close to home. Eleanor, you have been my wings, showing me the wider world through your adventures and passionate commitment to your work. I have needed and loved you both exactly as you are. Whatever you discover tomorrow, please remember this. Family is more than blood or legal documents. It's the choice we make every day to love each other despite our differences, to forgive each other's failings, to see each other clearly without looking away. All my love. Always, Mom." Rebecca lowered the letter, her expression unreadable. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken questions. "What do you think she meant about surprising us with her will?" I asked finally. Rebecca carefully refolded the letter and returned it to the envelope. "I guess we'll find out tomorrow." But I could see the worry in her eyes, the subtle tightening of her jaw. Whatever composure she'd regained during our paperwork, Session had been shattered by Dr. Garner's visit and Mom's cryptic message. I realized with a sinking feeling that my decision to withhold the truth about Rebecca's biological father might be rendered meaningless in less than 24 hours. If Mom had left instructions or information in her will or the safe deposit box, I would be exposed as a liar on top of everything else. The walls of Mom's house suddenly felt too close, the air too thick. I needed space to think, to prepare for whatever tomorrow might bring. "I think I'll head back to the inn," I said, rising from my chair. "Get some rest before tomorrow's meetings." Rebecca looked up sharply. "You're not staying here?" "I thought it might be easier if we both had some space," I said, though in truth, I couldn't bear the thought of spending the night under the same roof, keeping this secret while dreading its potential revelation. Rebecca's expression hardened. Again. "Running away seems to be your default setting." The barb stung, but I let it pass. "I'll meet you at Richard Hoffman's office at 9 tomorrow." As I gathered my purse and jacket, Rebecca remained at the dining table, surrounded by the papers and files that represented the practical aftermath of our mother's life. But her gaze was fixed on Mom's letter, and for a moment, she looked less like the controlled, competent attorney and more like a lost child trying to decipher a cryptic map. "Ellie," she called as I reached the front door. I turned back to see her framed in the dining room doorway, one hand gripping the doorframe as if for support. "What do you think she left in the safe deposit box?" I could only shake my head. "I don't know, Beck. I really don't." But the growing dread in my stomach suggested otherwise. Whatever Mom had arranged from beyond the grave, tomorrow would force us to confront truths I'd tried to protect us both from. And there would be no running away this time. The morning dawned gray and drizzly, matching my mood as I walked the 3 blocks from the Oakridge Inn to Richard Hoffman's law office. I'd spent another restless night, rehearsing possible scenarios for what might happen when the safe deposit box was opened. None of them ended well. Rebecca was already waiting in the lobby of the small brick building that housed several professional offices. She wore a sleek navy suit and pearl earrings that matched Mom's necklace, which now hung around her neck. Her hair was perfectly styled, makeup impeccable, armor against whatever vulnerabilities the day might expose. "You're early," I observed, checking my watch. It was only 8:45. "So are you," she countered, but without her usual edge. She looked as tired as I felt, the concealer under her eyes not quite hiding the dark circles. We rode the elevator in silence to the 3rd floor. Richard Hoffman's office was modest but tasteful. Oriental rugs over hardwood floors, mahogany furniture, shelves lined with legal texts. His secretary, a woman in her 50s with a kind smile, led us into his office immediately. Richard rose from behind his desk to greet us. I'd met him a few times over the years at holiday gatherings and the occasional dinner at Mom's house. He'd always struck me as avuncular and slightly old-fashioned, with his bow ties and pocket squares. Today, his expression was professionally somber as he shook our hands. "Rebecca, Eleanor, thank you for coming in. Please, have a seat." He gestured to the 2 leather chairs facing his desk. "First, let me express my deepest condolences. Your mother was not just a client, but a friend. Her loss is keenly felt by many in this community." We murmured appropriate thanks as we settled into the chairs. Rebecca immediately pulled a legal pad from her briefcase, pen poised to take notes. I simply folded my hands in my lap, bracing myself for whatever was coming. Richard adjusted his bow tie, deep burgundy with small gold dots, and opened a file on his desk. "As you know, Margaret appointed Rebecca as executor of her estate. However, 6 months ago, she made some unusual amendments to her will." Rebecca's pen stilled. "What kind of amendments?" Richard cleared his throat. "She added a condition to the execution of her will and the distribution of her assets." "A condition?" Rebecca repeated, her professional demeanor slipping slightly. Yes. Richard looked between us. Margaret stipulated that before any assets can be distributed, her daughters must spend 1 full week living together in her house, going through her personal belongings together. I blinked in disbelief. She wanted us to live together? For a week? That's correct. She was quite explicit. You must reside in the house together for 7 consecutive days, sorting through her personal effects, not just the financial documents, but her clothing, books, photographs, mementos, everything that constituted her personal life. Rebecca's face had gone rigid. That's absurd. I have court appearances scheduled, clients depending on me. I can't just— She anticipated your objection, Richard interrupted gently. She left a letter addressing it. He pulled an envelope from the file, Mom's cream stationery again, and handed it to Rebecca. Rebecca opened it with precise movements and read aloud. Rebecca, I know you're protesting about your busy schedule right now, but ask yourself honestly, if you can't find 1 week to honor your mother's final wishes, what does that say about the priorities that have shaped your life? The world will continue to turn without you for 7 days. Your sister needs your presence more than your clients. Need your expertise right now? Rebecca's voice faltered on the last sentence. She lowered the letter, color rising in her cheeks. There's more, Richard prompted softly. Rebecca swallowed and continued reading. Eleanor, I suspect you're planning an escape. Back to your research. Back to the solitary life you've built, so far from home. But you've spent years studying how ecosystems require diversity to thrive. Perhaps it's time to apply that wisdom to your own life. The answers you seek aren't in the desert, my darling. They're in the connections you've been afraid to nurture. I felt my own face warm. Mom had known us both so well. Our reflexes, our defense mechanisms, our tendencies to retreat in opposite directions when faced with emotional challenges. What happens if we don't comply? Rebecca asked, her lawyer instincts asserting themselves. Richard's expression remained neutral. Then the estate goes into a trust that will fund scholarships at Oakridge Community College. The house will be sold, with proceeds going to the Oakridge Historical Society. You'll each receive a small personal bequest, but the bulk of the estate will be redirected. She can't do that, Rebecca protested. It's coercion. Actually, she can, Richard replied. I advised her on the legal structure quite carefully. It's unusual, but perfectly legal. Rebecca turned to me, frustration evident in her expression. Did you know about this? Is this what she told you in that letter you found? No, I said honestly. I had no idea. Richard cleared his throat. There's one more stipulation. Margaret left specific instructions that you are not to open the safe. Deposit box until the 7 days have been completed. I felt a rush of relief so intense I nearly laughed out loud. Mom had given me a reprieve. A week to figure out how to handle the truth about Rebecca's parentage. A week to potentially build enough trust between us that the revelation might not destroy whatever reconciliation we might achieve. Rebecca, however, was incensed. This is outrageous. I'm the executor. I have a right to access all estate documents immediately. Not according to the amended will, Richard said calmly. I've already spoken with the bank. They won't release the contents of the box until I confirm the condition has been met. Rebecca stood abruptly, pacing the length of Richard's office. I can challenge this. There are legal grounds. Of course you can, Richard agreed. But litigation would take months, possibly years. And in the meantime, the estate would remain in limbo. He paused. Is that really how you want to honor your mother's memory? With a court battle over her final wishes? The question hung in the air. Rebecca stopped pacing, her back to us as she stared out the window at the rain-slicked streets of Oakridge. Her shoulders were tense, her posture rigid with anger or hurt, or some combination of both. I found myself studying my sister with new eyes. All her life she had sought control over her environment, her emotions, her relationships. Mom's stipulation had just removed that control entirely, forcing her into a situation where the only way forward was through vulnerability and cooperation. "Rebecca," I said quietly, "it's just a week. We both took leave from work. Maybe Mom was right. Maybe we need this time to—" I trailed off, not sure how to finish. To heal? To reconcile? To prepare for the truth that might still tear us apart? To what? Rebecca asked, turning to face me. Play house together like we're children? Pretend we're a happy family while diving through Mom's personal things? To get to know each other. Again, I suggested. As the adults we've become, not the kids we were. Something flickered in Rebecca's eyes. Resistance, then resignation, then perhaps the faintest spark of curiosity. She returned to her chair, gathering her legal pad and pen with deliberate movements. "Fine," she said finally. "1 week. But I need to stop by my apartment for clothes and to arrange coverage for my cases." Richard nodded, relief evident in his expression. "Of course. The condition begins when you're both residing in the house, so you have today to make any necessary arrangements." As we rose to leave, Richard reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small box wrapped in simple white paper. "Margaret also asked me to give you this once you'd agreed to her terms. She said it might help you begin the process." I took the package, surprised by its lightness. Outside Richard's office, the rain had stopped, and weak sunlight was breaking through the clouds. Rebecca and I stood on the sidewalk, an awkward silence between us. "I need to go to my apartment," she said finally. "I'll meet you at Mom's house around 4. I nodded. "I'll pick up some groceries, unless you'd rather eat out?" "Groceries are fine." She hesitated, then added, "Mom's lasagna recipe is in the box under the microwave. I could make that tonight if you want." The offer surprised me. Mom's lasagna had been our traditional comfort food, something Rebecca had learned to make perfectly during college while I could never get the bechamel sauce quite right. "I'd like that," I said, feeling like we were navigating newly formed, ice testing each step. Rebecca nodded once, then walked toward her car. I remained on the sidewalk, the mysterious package from Mom in one hand, the weight of unspoken truths still heavy on my shoulders. But for the first time since finding Mom's letter, I felt something close to hope. Mom had given us a gift, not just the inheritance, but time. 7 days to rebuild some foundation of trust before the safe deposit box potentially revealed the secret I'd chosen to keep. I looked down at the small package, curiosity finally overcoming apprehension. Carefully, I unwrapped it to find a simple wooden box with a hinged lid. Inside lay 2 identical keys on separate silver chains, presumably the keys to Mom's house, and a note in Mom's handwriting, "For my daughters. The key to home is also the key to healing. You each hold one, but both are needed to truly unlock what matters most." I closed the box, a lump forming in my throat. Whatever Mom had planned for us, whatever truths awaited in the safe deposit box, one thing was clear. She had valued our relationship as sisters, as her daughters, above everything else. The question was whether Rebecca and I could learn to do the same. Day 1 of our enforced cohabitation began awkwardly. I arrived at Mom's house first, arms full of grocery bags, and let myself in with my newly acquired key. The house felt different somehow, no longer just Mom's space, but a liminal zone between past and future, between the family we had been and whatever we might become. I unpacked the groceries, trying to remember Rebecca's preferences. Still a coffee snob who insisted on whole beans freshly ground each morning? Still addicted to those expensive chocolate-covered almonds? Still vegetarian except for Mom's lasagna and Thanksgiving turkey? I'd bought a little of everything, hoping to cover all possibilities. Rebecca arrived precisely at 4, rolling a sleek carry-on suitcase and carrying a leather laptop bag. She paused in the kitchen doorway, surveying my unpacking. "You remembered the almonds," she observed, spotting the distinctive purple package. I shrugged. Some things stick in your memory. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. I've been addicted to those since law school. She wheeled her suitcase toward the stairs. I'll take my old room. I assume you want yours? I nodded, though it felt strange to reclaim our childhood bedrooms at our ages. But then, everything about this situation was strange. By 6, we'd settled into an uneasy routine. Rebecca was in the kitchen assembling the lasagna, her movements precise and methodical. I'd set the dining room table with Mom's good china, not because the occasion warranted it, but because it felt important to mark this first night with some sense of ceremony. Richard gave me a copy of Mom's instructions for the week. Rebecca called from the kitchen. We're supposed to start with her bedroom tomorrow, then work our way through the house, one room each day. Sounds reasonable, I replied, straightening the silverware for the 3rd time. Did she specify what we're supposed to do with everything? Keep, donate, discard, our choice apparently. But we both have to agree. Rebecca appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. That could be challenging. I met her gaze. We can be reasonable adults about this, can't we? We'll see. She returned to the kitchen, leaving me to wonder if the skepticism in her voice was directed at me, herself, or the situation in general. Dinner was surprisingly pleasant. The lasagna was perfect. Rich with bechamel, the pasta sheets cooked. Just right. I'd opened a bottle of Cabernet from Mom's small wine rack, and we'd fallen into a conversation about neutral topics. Changes in Oakridge since I'd left, mutual acquaintances from high school, the merits of various streaming services. It wasn't until we were clearing the table that Rebecca broached a more sensitive subject. So what do you think Mom's really up to with all this? She asked, stacking plates with efficient movements. The forced togetherness, the mysterious safe deposit box we can't open until we've played happy family for a week? I carried the wine, glasses to the kitchen, choosing my words carefully. I think she wanted us to reconnect before dealing with whatever's in that box. Rebecca rinsed a plate, her back to me. And what do you think is in it? My heart rate quickened. I really don't know, Beck. She turned, fixing me with her analytical gaze. But you have a theory. I hesitated. I think it might be something that could change how we see Mom and Dad, or ourselves. Otherwise, why all the secrecy? Rebecca nodded slowly. That's what worries me. After a lifetime of being the perfect suburban couple, what skeletons could they possibly have worth all this? Drama? If she only knew. Maybe it's not about skeletons, I suggested, drawing a wine glass with more attention than it required. Maybe it's about connections she wanted us to understand. Like what? I shrugged, retreating to ambiguity. Family is complicated. People are complicated. Rebecca studied me for a moment, then turned back to the dishes. Well, whatever it is, I hope it's worth a week of my billable hours. After cleanup, we migrated to the living room with fresh glasses of wine. Rebecca curled into Mom's favorite armchair while I took the sofa. For a while, we sat in companionable silence, the old grandfather clock in the hallway marking time with its familiar ticking. Do you remember when Dad taught us to tell time on that clock? Rebecca asked suddenly. I smiled at the memory. You learned so quickly. I kept getting the hour and minute hands confused. Because you were 5, Rebecca said, her voice softening. I was 7 and thought I was so grown up because I could read the time. You were always in a hurry to grow up, I observed. Rebecca swirled her wine thoughtfully. Someone had to be the responsible one. The comment could have sparked an argument, but something in her tone, more reflective than accusatory, made me pause. Is that how you saw yourself? As the responsible one? Wasn't it obvious? Her gaze fixed on some middle distance. You were the dreamer, the one with your head in the clouds or your nose in a book? Someone had to keep track of permission slips and dentist appointments and whether the roof needed repairs. I'd never considered our roles from her perspective before. I always thought you liked being in charge, that it was a power thing. Rebecca laughed softly. Sometimes it was, but mostly it was just what I did, what was expected. Expected? By whom? She shrugged. Everyone. Mom, Dad, teachers, myself mostly. She took a sip of wine. The straight-A student? The responsible daughter? It becomes your identity after a while. Hard to let go of, even when you want to. I thought of the letter hidden in my suitcase, of the truth that would shatter the identity she'd built. And, did you want to let go of it? She was quiet for so long I thought she might not answer. Then, almost whisper-soft, sometimes. When I see people like you who just follow their hearts without worrying about what anyone thinks. The admission stunned me. All these years, I'd envied her confidence, her certainty, her place in the world, never imagining she might have envied my freedom. I worry about what people think, I said. Just different people, maybe. Academic peers, research committees. Rebecca smiled faintly. It's not the same as worrying whether you're living up to a parent's expectations. The irony of her words twisted in my chest. She'd spent her life trying to live up to expectations set by a man who wasn't her biological father. I think Mom and Dad were proud of both of us, I offered, in different ways. Maybe. She set her empty glass on the side table. Well, we should get some rest. Tomorrow we start going through Mom's things, and I imagine that won't be easy. The moment of openness was closing, the walls coming back up. But something had shifted between us, a first small crack in the facade of rivalry and resentment that had defined our relationship for so long. Good night, Beck, I said as she rose to go upstairs. She paused at the doorway, looking back with an expression I couldn't quite read. Night, Ellie. Thanks for listening. Alone in the living room, I refilled my wine glass and contemplated the strange day. There had been moments, during dinner, just now in conversation, when I'd glimpsed a version of Rebecca I hadn't seen in years. The sister who had once carved our initials in a tree, who had taught me to French braid my hair, who had stayed up all night with me during a thunderstorm when I was too scared to sleep alone. Could we find our way back to some version of that? Closeness? Or was this evening just a temporary truce? A false resolution that would crumble when the truth eventually emerged. The grandfather clock chimed 10, its melodic tones echoing through the quiet house. Day 1 down, 6 to go. Tomorrow we would begin the actual work Mom had set for us, sorting through her most personal possessions, deciding together what to keep and what to let go. And somewhere in that process, I would need to decide whether the truth Rebecca's biological father was something to keep hidden or something we both needed to face. I finished my wine and turned off the living room lights, making my way upstairs to my childhood bedroom. Through the wall, I could hear Rebecca moving around in her room, the same sounds I'd grown up with, the familiar presence of my sister just a few feet away yet separated by so much more than plaster and wood. Sisters forever, she had carved into that tree all those years ago. I desperately wanted to believe it could still be true, even after the safe deposit box was opened and all secrets were finally revealed. Morning arrived with the gentle spring sunlight filtering through the faded curtains of my childhood bedroom. For a moment, disoriented by sleep, I could almost believe I was 16 again, that Mom was downstairs making coffee, that the last 20 years had been an elaborate dream. Then reality reasserted itself. Mom was gone. Rebecca and I were reluctant housemates thrown together by our mother's final orchestration. And somewhere in this house, perhaps in the very room we were scheduled to tackle today, there might be more revelations waiting to be discovered. I found Rebecca already in the kitchen, dressed in what appeared to be her version of casual clothes. Dark jeans and a crisp button-down shirt, her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She looked up from her laptop as I entered. "I made coffee," she said, gesturing to the full pot. "And there's yogurt in the fridge." "Thanks." I poured myself a cup, noting with amusement that she'd used Mom's precise coffee-to-water ratio. Some habits were inherited, I supposed, then caught myself on the word inherited. Not everything was genetic. Some things were simply learned through proximity and observation. Rebecca closed her laptop. "I've been reviewing Mom's instructions again. For each room, we're supposed to sort everything into 4 categories. Things I want to keep, things you want to keep, things to donate, and things to discard." "Sounds straightforward enough," I said, taking a seat across from her. "There's more." Rebecca sipped her coffee. "After we've sorted everything, we're supposed to discuss any items we both want and come to an agreement about who gets what." I nodded slowly. Mom never did anything without a purpose. She's forcing us to communicate, to negotiate, to compromise, Rebecca added, a slight edge to her voice. "Is that so terrible?" she sighed. "No, just not my strong suit." I smiled despite myself. "At least you're self-aware." To my surprise, she smiled back. "I've been told it's the first step toward growth." We finished breakfast in companionable silence, then headed upstairs to Mom's bedroom. Standing in the doorway, I was struck by how unchanged it was since my last visit. The pale blue bedspread neatly arranged, the silver-framed photographs on the dresser, the small collection of perfume bottles on the vanity. Mom's presence lingered. In every detail. Rebecca hesitated beside me. "This feels invasive somehow." "I know." I understood her reluctance. Entering Mom's most private space, sorting through her belongings, it felt like trespassing, even with permission. "Where should we start?" Rebecca asked, her professional efficiency warring with visible discomfort. I considered the room. "Closet first? Get the clothes out of the way?" She nodded, seemingly relieved to have a concrete task. We worked methodically, through Mom's wardrobe. Winter clothes, summer clothes, formal wear she'd rarely had occasion to use in recent years. Most items we designated for donation, each of us selecting just a few meaningful pieces to keep. I chose Mom's gardening sweater, worn soft with age, and a blue scarf I'd given her for Christmas years ago. Rebecca selected a cashmere cardigan and Mom's winter coat. There was no conflict, no competition over these everyday items. It was when we reached the jewelry box that the first real tension emerged. Rebecca opened the carved wooden box on Mom's dresser, revealing the modest collection inside. Mom had never been one for expensive jewelry, preferring sentimental pieces to valuable ones. The pearl necklace had been her most precious item, and Rebecca was already wearing it. "I should catalog these properly," Rebecca said, slipping into professional mode. "Some might have significant monetary or sentimental value." "We don't need to catalog them," I replied, a familiar irritation stirring. "We just need to decide which pieces matter to each of us." Rebecca's jaw tightened. "That's exactly why we should document everything first, to ensure the process is fair and transparent." "Fair and transparent," I repeated. "Like you telling me about the safe deposit box when you actually didn't have the key?" Rebecca flushed. "That was different." "Was it?" I leaned against the dresser, suddenly tired of the dance we'd been doing. "Look, Rebecca, if we're going to get through this week, we need to establish some ground rules." Her eyebrows rose. "Such as?" "Such as no more games. No more withholding information or manipulating situations to your advantage. We're equals in this process, regardless of who's the executor or who lived closer to Mom." Rebecca's posture stiffened. "I haven't been playing games." "The safe deposit box you claimed only you knew about? The legal documents you've been reviewing without sharing with me?" The way you've positioned yourself as Mom's chosen representative? I kept my voice calm but firm. Those all feel like games to me. For a moment, I thought she would argue, fall back into her defensive posture. Instead, she was quiet, her fingers absently touching the pearl necklace at her throat. "I didn't think of it that way," she said finally. "It just seemed natural that I would handle those things. I've always handled the practical matters." "I know you have," I acknowledged. "And I've appreciated it, many times. But this is different. This is about both of us figuring out how to move forward without Mom. And we need to do it as equals." Rebecca nodded slowly. "Okay, no games." She hesitated, then added, "But that goes both ways, Ellie. No more running off with letters or hiding things you find." The irony of her demand wasn't lost on me, given the secret I was still keeping. But there was truth in it, too. I had taken Mom's letter without explanation, had disappeared rather than face difficult conversations. "Agreed," I said. "From now on, we share what we find, we discuss it openly, and we make decisions together." As if to seal our new understanding, Rebecca picked up a small jewelry box from within the larger collection. "Let's start here. This was Grandma Sullivan's locket. Mom always said she wanted us both to have something of Grandma's." My throat tightened. Grandma Sullivan, Dad's mother, had been gone for over 30 years, but I still remembered her cookie jar shaped like a fat hen in the way she called me duckling. The locket had been her most treasured possession, containing tiny photographs of her parents, and Rebecca, unknowingly, was not biologically connected to her at all. "You should have it," I said, the words escaping before I could overthink them. "You were named after her, after all." Rebecca's middle name, Elizabeth, had come from Grandma Sullivan. Rebecca looked genuinely surprised. "Are you sure? You were always closer to her." I nodded, unable to explain that my decision came from a place of guilt rather than generosity. Let her have this connection to the grandmother she'd believed was hers by blood. "Thank you," she said, softly, opening the locket to reveal the faded photographs inside. "That's really thoughtful of you." We continued through the jewelry box, dividing items with surprising ease now that we'd established our new understanding. By lunchtime, we'd sorted most of Mom's personal items, clothing, jewelry, toiletries, and moved on to the books on her nightstand and the photographs on her walls. As we worked, we fell into conversations about the memories attached to various objects. The pressed flower Mom had kept from Dad's first Valentine's bouquet, the collection of seashells from family vacations to Cape Cod, the dog-eared paperbacks she'd read and reread over the years. It was while packing these books that I noticed Rebecca had grown unusually quiet. I looked up to find her holding a blue leather volume, her expression troubled. "What's that?" I asked. "Mom's journal," she said, turning it over in her hands. "From the year Dad died." My heart rate quickened. I didn't know she kept a journal. Rebecca nodded. "She started after his funeral. I found her writing in it a few times, but she always put it away when I came into the room." She ran her fingers over the cover. "I never read it. It seemed too private." Now she held it out to me, her expression unreadable. "We should read it together, if we're being open and equal about everything." I stared at the journal, my newly established boundary already being tested. If Mom had written about Rebecca's biological father in those pages, our fragile truce would shatter immediately. "Not everything needs to be shared," I said carefully. "Maybe some of Mom's thoughts should remain private." Rebecca's eyes narrowed. "That's not what you said an hour ago about being equals and sharing everything we find." "Personal reflections are different from material possessions," I argued. "Mom wrote those words for herself, not for us. Or maybe she left it for us to find, like everything else she's orchestrated this week." Rebecca's tone hardened. "You're being hypocritical, Ellie. You demanded openness when it suited you, but now you're retreating." She was right, of course. I was retreating, trying to protect her from truths that would hurt her, but also trying to protect myself from being the messenger. I took a deep breath. "You're right. I'm sorry." I held out my hand for the journal, my pulse racing. "We should read it together." Rebecca placed the journal in my palm, triumph flashing briefly in her eyes. "After lunch? We've been at this all morning." I nodded, grateful for the reprieve. After lunch. As we headed downstairs, the journal heavy in my hands, I wondered if I'd just made a terrible mistake. If Mom's private thoughts would reveal the very secret I'd been trying to protect Rebecca from, forcing a confrontation neither of us was ready for. The first boundary I'd established was about honesty and equality. Now I had to decide whether complete honesty was truly what either of us needed. Lunch was a quiet affair. Sandwiches eaten at the kitchen table, both of us lost in our own thoughts. The journal sat between us like a time bomb, its blue leather cover innocuous yet threatening. I kept glancing at it, wondering what secrets it contained, what revelations might be waiting inside its pages. Rebecca finished her sandwich and wiped her hands methodically on a napkin. "Ready?" I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. "Where should we read it?" "Living room," she decided. "More comfortable than the kitchen." We settled on opposite ends of the sofa, the journal still closed between us. Outside, clouds had gathered, dimming the afternoon light and creating a cocoon-like atmosphere in the room. "Should we take turns?" Rebecca asked, her earlier insistence softening into uncertainty. "I'll start," I offered, reaching for the journal before I could lose my nerve. I opened to the first page, dated 2 weeks after Dad's funeral. Mom's handwriting flowed across the page in her characteristic elegant script. May 12, 2008, James has been gone for 14 days. The casseroles have stopped arriving. The phone calls have dwindled. The girls have returned to their lives. Rebecca to her law classes, Eleanor to her sophomore year. And I am alone in this house that feels both too empty and too full of memories. Doctor. Mitchell suggested keeping this journal as a way to process my grief. It feels artificial, writing to myself. But perhaps that's preferable to burdening the girls with the messiness of my emotions. They have their own grief to navigate. I glanced at Rebecca. Her expression was carefully neutral, but I noticed her hands were clasped tightly in her lap. I continued reading. Rebecca has called every day since the funeral. She's so like James, in her determination to fix things, to create order from chaos. Yesterday she asked if she should defer her final semester to stay with me. I told her absolutely not. James would be horrified at the thought of her interrupting her education on my account. Eleanor calls less frequently but sends photographs from her research trip in Costa Rica. Plants and insects and sunsets, no words needed. It's her way of showing me that beauty still exists in the world, even when my own has collapsed. She's more like me in that way, finding comfort in the natural world when human connections become too painful. Rebecca shifted beside me. She understood us both so well. I nodded, continuing to the next entry. May 19th, 2008, found myself in James's closet today. His clothes still smell like him. I couldn't bring myself to pack anything away. How do you erase 27 years of marriage? How do you decide which artifacts of a life shared remain and which must go? Rebecca wants me to start making these decisions. Eleanor says there's no rush. I find myself caught between their approaches, just as I always have been. I turned the page, every mention of Dad causing a twist of anxiety. Would Mom have written about Rebecca's biological father? Would the truth be revealed in the most abrupt and painful way possible? June 3rd, 2008. Dinner with Thomas tonight. My heart stopped. Thomas Lawson, Rebecca's biological father. I faltered, my voice trailing off. "What is it?" Rebecca asked sharply. I swallowed hard and forced myself to continue. Dinner with Thomas tonight. My brother means well, but his grief for James is different from mine. He lost a brother-in-law, a friend of 30 years. I lost my North Star. He keeps trying to reminisce about fishing trips and Super Bowl parties, while I can barely speak James's name without feeling like I'm drowning. Relief washed over me. Thomas was our uncle, Mom's brother, not Thomas Lawson. I'd forgotten Uncle Thomas had come to stay for a few weeks after Dad died. The girls respond so differently to their uncle's presence. Rebecca keeps him at a distance, answering his questions, politely but briefly. Eleanor seeks him out, asking about family stories, about James as a young man. I wonder if it's because she feels she has 15 fewer years of memories than her sister does, always trying to fill in the gaps of her knowledge of her father. I handed the journal to Rebecca. Your turn. She took it hesitantly, as if it might burn her fingers. Her voice was steadier than mine as she read, June 10th, 2008 found an old photograph album in the attic today. Pictures from before the girls were born, from when James and I were first married. We look so young, so certain that life would unfold exactly as we planned. A photograph of the four of us at the beach, Eleanor just a toddler, Rebecca holding her hand at the edge of the water. James captured that moment perfectly, Rebecca already. The protector, the responsible one. Eleanor fearless, eager to rush into the waves. I've been thinking about the secrets we keep, even from those we love most. The things we never say because we fear the damage truth might do. James and I had our secrets from each other, small ones mostly, but some larger ones that we carried silently, out of love or fear, or some complex mixture of both. Rebecca's voice faltered slightly on the last line. She looked up at me. What do you think she meant? What secrets? I shrugged, trying to appear casual while my pulse raced. Every marriage has private moments, things couples don't share with anyone else. Rebecca seemed unconvinced, but continued reading. June 23rd, 2008 Rebecca called today, distraught about her wills and trusts final. Convinced she'd failed, that she'd disappointed James, that her entire legal career was in jeopardy. When her results came back, highest grade in the class, she was almost dismissive of her success. It should have been better, she said. Recognize that perfectionism. It's the shadow James cast, though he never meant to. His quiet excellence set a standard that Rebecca has been trying to meet since she was old enough to understand the concept of achievement. I wonder if she knows that he struggled with the same demons, the constant fear of not being good enough, of not deserving his success. Sometimes I think his greatest regret was not telling Rebecca the truth about. Rebecca stopped abruptly, her face paling. The rest of the page is torn out. I leaned over to look. She was right. The next page had been carefully removed, leaving only a jagged edge where it had been torn from the binding. Why would Mom tear out a page? Rebecca asked, her voice strained. My mouth went dry. Maybe she wrote something she later regretted. Something too private. About Dad's greatest regret? About the truth? Rebecca's legal mind was already connecting dots, seeking patterns. What truth, Ellie? What was Dad supposed to tell me? I forced myself to meet her gaze. I don't know. The lie felt heavy on my tongue, but what choice did I have? To blurt out here, in the middle of reading, Mom's private thoughts that Dad wasn't her biological father? That would be cruel beyond measure. Rebecca turned back to the journal, flipping through the next few pages. There are more missing, 3 more pages torn out, all from late June. My stomach twisted. Had Mom written about Thomas Lawson, then, thought better of leaving such revelations in her journal where they might be found? Maybe we should stop reading, I suggested. These were her private thoughts during a difficult time. Rebecca closed the journal, her expression troubled. No. You were right earlier about respecting Mom's privacy. She set the journal on the coffee table. But those missing pages, they feel significant. People often write things in journals they later wish they hadn't, I said, especially when grieving. Rebecca nodded slowly, but I could see her mind, working, filing away this new mystery alongside the others that had emerged since Mom's death. We should finish sorting her bedroom, she said finally, rising from the sofa. We've still got the rest of the house to get through this week. I followed her upstairs, relief mingling with renewed anxiety. We'd dodged one potential revelation, but Mom's journal had introduced a new complication. Dad's greatest regret about not telling Rebecca the truth was too specific to ignore. And Rebecca, with her analytical mind and attention to detail, was unlikely to let it go. As we returned to the methodical work of sorting through Mom's belongings, I noticed a new tension in Rebecca's movements, a preoccupation in her expression. The easy cooperation of the morning had been replaced by the watchfulness of someone who senses they're not being told the whole truth. I'd established a boundary about honesty and openness, only to break it almost immediately. The unexpected consequence of reading Mom's journal wasn't the revelation I'd feared, but something possibly worse. Rebecca's growing suspicion that important truths were being withheld from her. And she was right. By the third day of our enforced cohabitation, a new pattern had emerged between Rebecca and me. On the surface, we maintained a civil, even cooperative approach to sorting through Mom's possessions. We worked efficiently through the study, organizing financial documents, cataloging books, determining which furniture pieces to keep or donate. But beneath that functional exterior, something had shifted. Rebecca watched me constantly, her gaze analytical and searching, especially when she thought I wasn't looking. She asked casual questions that felt like cross-examinations. Had Mom ever mentioned changing her will to me? Did I remember Uncle Thomas saying anything unusual during his visit after Dad died? Had Dad ever talked to me about family secrets? I answered truthfully when I could, evasively when necessary, all while feeling the weight of the real secret growing heavier by the hour. I found something interesting, Rebecca announced late that afternoon as we sorted through Dad's old desk, in the study. Her tone was deliberately casual, but there was an underlying sharpness that put me instantly on alert. What is it? I asked, looking up from the stack of old academic journals I'd been sorting. Rebecca held up a manila folder. Medical records, Dad's and Mom's. She flipped it open, scanning the contents with practiced efficiency. Annual physicals, vaccination records, blood work. I continued sorting journals, trying to appear unconcerned. That makes sense. Mom kept everything organized. Rebecca turned a page, then another. It's odd, though. What is? Dad's blood type was O negative. She looked up at me. That's not common. Only about 6% of the population. I set down the journal I'd been holding, my hands suddenly unsteady. Is that relevant to anything? Rebecca shrugged, but her eyes remained fixed on mine. Just interesting from a medical history perspective. Do you know your blood type, Ellie? A positive, I answered, then immediately regretted it. Same as Mom, Rebecca observed. I'm AB positive. I forced myself to hold her gaze, though my heart was pounding. Basic genetics had never been my strong suit, but even I knew enough to understand what she was implying. If Dad was O negative, he couldn't possibly be the biological father of someone with AB blood. Blood types are complicated, I said, reaching for another journal. I barely remember that unit from high school biology. They're not that complicated, Rebecca countered. In fact, they follow very specific inheritance patterns. Two parents with O and A blood types cannot produce a child with AB blood. The room seemed to shrink around us, the air growing thick with unspoken accusations. What exactly are you suggesting, Rebecca? She closed the folder with deliberate care. I'm not suggesting anything, just noting a scientific curiosity. But her expression said otherwise. She'd found a thread and was pulling on it, watching to see what might unravel. I'm going to make some tea, I said, needing to escape her scrutiny, if only for a few minutes. In the kitchen, I gripped the edge of the counter, taking deep breaths to steady myself. Rebecca was figuring it out. Of course she was. She'd always been methodical, detail-oriented, relentless in pursuing answers. The missing journal pages had triggered her suspicion, and now the blood-type discovery was adding fuel to the fire. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, then the sound of her bedroom door closing. She was giving me space, or perhaps giving herself. Time to process what she'd discovered. My phone buzzed with a text from Richard Hoffman, just checking in. How is the week progressing? Any questions about Margaret's instructions? I stared at the message, tempted to ask if he knew about Rebecca's parentage, if that was part of what awaited us in the safe deposit box. But I didn't. Whatever Mom had arranged, she'd intended us to follow her carefully constructed path. Jumping ahead would only create more chaos. We're making progress, I replied. No questions yet. The kettle whistled, pulling me back to the immediate task. I made 2 cups of tea and carried them upstairs, pausing outside Rebecca's door. After a moment's hesitation, I knocked gently. Come in, she called, her voice composed once more. I entered to find her sitting on the edge of her bed, the manila folder of medical records open beside her. On her lap was a leather-bound volume I recognized as our family photo album. I brought you tea, I said, setting the cup on her nightstand. Thanks. She didn't look up from the album. I've been looking at these old photos of Dad, trying to see myself in his features. The simple statement broke my heart. She was already questioning her identity, searching for confirmation of the connection she'd always believed was hers by birth. Rebecca, don't, she interrupted sharply. I'm not ready to discuss what I'm thinking right now. I need more information. I nodded, respecting her request, though every instinct urged me to explain, to soften the blow that was coming. We should get back to the study, she said, closing the album with finality. We still have half the desk to sort through. As we returned to our work, the distance between us had grown immeasurably. The tentative connection we'd been building over the past few days seemed to evaporate, replaced by a taut silence broken only by necessary communication about the task at hand. Rebecca had always valued truth and transparency. I'd known that withholding information from her was risky. Now, sensing she'd been deceived about something fundamental to her identity, she was retreating behind walls higher and stronger than ever before. When evening came, rather than sharing dinner as we had the previous nights, Rebecca announced she had calls to make and took a sandwich to her room. I ate alone at the kitchen table, the empty chair across from me a stark reminder of how quickly our progress could unravel. 4 days remained until we could access the safe deposit box. 4 days to decide whether to tell Rebecca the truth myself, or let Mom's arrangements reveal it in whatever way she had planned. Either way, the facade was crumbling, the escalation had begun, and there would be no going back. The 4th day dawned with a thunderstorm, dark clouds rolling across the sky, rain lashing against the windows, occasional flashes of lightning illuminating the pre-dawn darkness. I'd slept poorly, dreams filled with torn journal pages and accusing eyes. When I made my way downstairs, I was surprised to find Rebecca already in the kitchen, surrounded by boxes of old photographs and albums that hadn't been there the night before. I've been up since 4, she said by way of explanation, not looking up from the images spread across the table. Found these in the basement. I poured myself coffee from the pot she'd made. Find anything interesting? You could say that. Her voice was controlled, each word precisely measured. She selected a photograph and held it out to me. It was faded but still clear enough. Mom, much younger, with her arm around a man I didn't recognize. They were laughing at something off camera, their posture suggesting easy intimacy. "Who is that?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "I was hoping you might tell me." Rebecca's eyes were red-rimmed but dry, her expression a careful mask of neutrality. "There are dozens of photos of this man with Mom, all dated before she met Dad, all with his name written on the back. Thomas Lawson." My hand trembled slightly as I set down my coffee mug. The moment had arrived, ready or not. "Rebecca, don't." She held up a hand. "Just answer one question. Is this man my biological father?" The directness of her question left no room for evasion. I'd spent days trying to find the right way to tell her this truth, the gentle path that would cause the least pain. But there was no gentle path. There was only the truth, stark and unavoidable. "Yes," I said quietly. "He is." Rebecca nodded once, as if confirming a theory rather than receiving life-altering information. "And you knew. That's what was in Mom's letter to you." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "Yes, she explained everything. She was engaged to Thomas before she met Dad. He left before you were born. Dad adopted you when you were a baby. When were you planning to tell me?" The control in her voice was slipping, anger beginning to seep through. I met her gaze directly. "I didn't know if I should. Mom left the letter for me to find, but she left it up to me whether to share it with you. I was trying to protect you." "Protect me." She repeated the words flatly. "By lying to my face when I asked what was in the letter, by watching me search for answers without offering any, by letting me question my own memories and identity without saying a word. Each accusation landed like a physical blow. She was right. I'd failed her. Not just these past few days, but in the moment I'd chosen to conceal the truth. "I'm sorry," I said, the words wholly inadequate. "I thought you knew what was best for me." Rebecca stood abruptly, gathering the photographs with jerky movements. "Just like Mom and Dad did. Just like everyone has always done. Poor Rebecca, too fragile to handle the truth about her own life." "That's not fair," I protested. "Mom kept this secret for 40 years because she and Dad thought it would hurt you unnecessarily." I was trying to honor their judgment. "Their judgment?" Rebecca's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Their judgment was to build our entire family on a lie, to let me believe James Sullivan was my biological father, to never tell me about the man whose blood actually runs in my veins." She tapped the photograph of Thomas Lawson. "Did Mom's letter explain why she never told me about him? Why they decided I didn't deserve to know my own origin story?" I hesitated, remembering Mom's explanations. "Thomas left before you were born. He had untreated bipolar disorder. He died in a car accident when you were 3. Mom and Dad felt there was no point in complicating your life with knowledge of a father who would never be part of it." Rebecca absorbed this information with a visible effort at control. "And what else did Mom's letter say? What other secrets has everyone been keeping from me?" I took a deep breath. "Mom said that after Dad died, you became almost obsessive about being recognized as his real daughter. She thought you might have sensed the truth somehow." Rebecca's face paled. "I was grieving my father. I was trying to preserve his memory." "I know," I said gently. "And he was your father in every way that mattered. He loved you completely." "Don't tell me how he felt," she snapped. "You have no idea what it's like to discover your entire identity is based on a lie. That the family stories you've cherished, the heritage you've claimed, the man you've mourned as your father, it was all a fabrication." "Not a fabrication," I insisted. "Dad chose you, Rebecca. He adopted you because he wanted to be your father. That's more meaningful than biology." She stared at me for a long moment, her expression shifting from anger to something more complex. Hurt, betrayal, and beneath it all, a profound grief. "Where is it?" she asked finally. Where is what? Mom's letter. The one that explains all of this. I want to read it myself. I hesitated. Are you sure? It's pretty detailed about— Stop, she interrupted fiercely. Stop treating me like I can't handle the truth. I'm not a child, Ellie. I'm a 40-year-old woman who has just discovered. Her entire family has been lying to her for her entire life. I deserve to read Mom's words for myself. She was right, of course. I'd kept the truth from her out of love, out of a misguided desire to protect her. But in doing so, I'd only compounded the betrayal she now felt. It's in my suitcase, I said. I'll get it. As I climbed the stairs to my room, thunder rattled the windows, a perfect accompaniment to the storm breaking between Rebecca and me. I retrieved the letter from where I'd hidden it beneath my clothes, along with the documents Mom had included: the birth certificate, the adoption papers, the photographs of Thomas Lawson. When I returned to the kitchen, Rebecca was standing by the window, watching the rain. She turned as I entered, her expression now carefully composed, the attorney preparing to review evidence. Here, I said, holding out the envelope. Everything Mom left for me. The complete truth, as she knew it. Rebecca took it, her fingers brushing mine. Our first physical contact in days. Thank you. The simple acknowledgement felt like a tiny bridge across the chasm that had opened between us. Not forgiveness, not yet. But perhaps the first step toward understanding. She gestured toward the door. I need to read this alone. I nodded. I'll be here when you're ready to talk. As Rebecca left the kitchen, letter in hand, I sat heavily at the table, surrounded by the scattered photographs of a man neither of us had known, but whose absence had shaped our lives in ways we were only beginning to understand. The moment of truth had arrived, and there was no going back. 2 hours passed before I heard Rebecca's footsteps on the stairs. The storm had moved on, leaving behind a washed clean sky and the fresh scent of rain through the open kitchen window. I'd remained at the table, unable to focus on anything beyond the upcoming confrontation. When Rebecca appeared in the doorway, her face was composed but transformed. The letter hung loosely from her fingers, its pages slightly crumpled from what I imagined had been multiple readings. I packed my things, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. I'm going back to my apartment. Rebecca, I need space, Ellie. Time to process all of this. She set the letter on the table between us. Mom was right about one thing. I always sensed something wasn't quite aligned in our family. The way Dad would sometimes look at me with, not sadness exactly, but something close to it. I nodded, giving her the space to continue. I'm angry, she said simply. Not just about the secret, but about everyone deciding what I could and couldn't handle. About you continuing that pattern even after Mom died. I know, I acknowledged. I made the wrong choice. Rebecca's gaze was direct and unwavering. Yes, you did. But I understand why you made it. That small concession felt like the first ray of light after the storm. What about Mom's stipulation? I asked. We're supposed to spend the full week here. I've already called Richard, she replied. Explained that we've discovered the truth ahead of schedule. He agreed the purpose of Mom's arrangement has been fulfilled. We can access the safe deposit box tomorrow. Her decisiveness didn't surprise me. Rebecca had always found clarity in action, in moving forward rather than dwelling in emotional uncertainty. And then what? I ventured. Then I'm taking a leave of absence, she said. There's information in Mom's letter about Thomas Lawson, where he lived, his work as a sculptor. I'm going to New York to learn more about him. Alone? She nodded. This is my journey, Ellie. My heritage to explore, my questions to answer. She hesitated, then added, but I'll share what I discover if you want to know. It was an olive branch. Small, but significant. Not forgiveness yet, but an opening toward a different kind of relationship, one built on the truth rather than protection, on respect for her autonomy rather than assumptions about her needs. "I would like that," I said softly. Rebecca gathered her car keys and purse. "Meet me at the bank tomorrow at 10. We'll see what Mom left in the safe deposit box." As she turned to go, I called after her. "Rebecca, Dad loved you. That part was never a lie." She paused at the door, her back to me. "I know," she said, her voice barely audible. "That's the only reason I can forgive any of this." Then she was gone, the front door closing behind her with a quiet finality. I remained at the kitchen table, surrounded by scattered photographs of a man who had upended our lives decades after his death. Rebecca's departure wasn't an ending, but a beginning. The first definitive action of her new life, one where she would construct her identity based on complete truths rather than comfortable fictions. And I would have to learn to be her sister in a different way, not as a protector, but as an equal. Not as someone who shielded her from pain, but as someone who respected her right to face it directly. Tomorrow we would open the safe deposit box together, but today we had already unlocked something more important, the possibility of an honest relationship, whatever form it might take. The First National Bank of Oakridge hadn't changed since I was a child. The same marble columns flanked the entrance, the same faded green carpet covered the floors, and the same hushed atmosphere of financial propriety hung in the air. Rebecca was already waiting when I arrived, dressed in a charcoal pantsuit that seemed like armor. Her eyes were clear but tired, suggesting another night of little sleep. "Ready?" she asked without preamble. I nodded, and together we approached the desk where a middle-aged woman waited to assist us. 20 minutes later, we sat in a private room with the safe deposit box between us. Rebecca, as executor, held the key, and I watched as she unlocked it with steady hands. Inside was a thick manila envelope with both our names written on it, a small wooden box, and a leather portfolio. Rebecca opened the envelope first, removing a letter in Mom's handwriting and a stack of legal documents. She scanned the letter quickly, then passed it to me without comment. "My darling daughters, if you're reading this, you've completed your week together, or found your way to this box ahead of schedule, which wouldn't surprise me. Either way, I hope you've used this time to reconnect, to remember that whatever differences exist between you, you are and always will be sisters." Rebecca, by now you know the truth about your biological father. I'm deeply sorry for keeping this from you. We thought we were protecting you, but I've come to realize that protection can become its own form of harm when it denies someone knowledge of their own story. To that end, I've arranged 2 gifts for you both. First, the legal documents enclosed transfer ownership of our house equally to both of you, not to sell, unless you both agree, but to share, a permanent family home where you can both return separately or together. Second, the wooden box contains what remains of Thomas Lawson's personal effects, things I've kept hidden for too long. They belong to Rebecca now, part of her heritage just as much as anything from the Sullivan family. The portfolio contains James's art, sketches he made over the years of both his girls. He loved you both immeasurably, in ways I could never adequately explain. Whatever you choose to do with these gifts is entirely your decision. I've done enough directing from beyond the grave. All my love. Always. Mom, I looked up to find Rebecca, examining the contents of the wooden box, a man's wristwatch, several small clay sculptures, a leather-bound sketchbook, and a bundle of letters tied with faded ribbon. "His things," she said quietly. "A piece of who he was." "Will you read the letters?" I asked. She nodded. "Eventually, when I'm ready." She closed the box carefully. "And the portfolio?" I opened the leather case to find dozens of pencil sketches, Rebecca at various ages, me growing up, both of us, together in countless captured moments. Dad had been a talented amateur artist, though he'd rarely shared his work outside the family. One drawing in particular caught my attention. Rebecca, at about 16, concentrating intently on a book, her expression serious yet peaceful. On the margin, Dad had written, "My remarkable daughter, so determined to understand everything." I handed it to Rebecca, whose expression softened as she studied it. "I never knew he drew me like this." "He saw you," I said simply. "The real you." Rebecca carefully returned the sketch to the portfolio. "And the house? What do you think about that arrangement?" I considered the question. "I think Mom was hoping it would keep us connected, even if our lives remain separate." "A forced connection," Rebecca observed, but without bitterness. "Or an opportunity," I countered. "I've been thinking about taking a position at Oakridge Community College. Their environmental science department has an opening. It would mean moving back here." Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "Since when?" "Since I realized what I've been missing by staying away." I met her gaze directly. "Not just Mom, but you. Us." She was quiet for a moment, digesting this. "I'm still going. To New York," she said finally. "I need to see where Thomas lived. Visit his old studio if it still exists. Talk to anyone who might have known him." "I understand. But," she continued, "I'll be coming back. My life is here, my practice, my clients." She hesitated. "My sister." The simple acknowledgement hung between us. Not forgiveness exactly, but acceptance. A recognition that whatever had been broken between us might still be mended, given time and truth. As we gathered the contents of the safe deposit box and prepared to leave, Rebecca paused. "Do you remember that tree in Palmer Park? The one where we carved our initials?" I nodded, surprised by the question. "I checked yesterday before I went home. The carving is still there, faded but visible." She met my eyes directly. "Sisters. Forever." It wasn't a declaration of healing. We had too far to go for that. It was something more tentative, but perhaps more important. An intention to try. To rebuild not what we had been, but what we might yet become. Outside the bank, we stood, awkwardly, neither quite sure how to end this chapter of our shared story. "When do you leave for New York?" I asked. "Tomorrow morning," she replied. "I'll be gone about 2 weeks. Text me when you get there? Let me know you arrived safely?" A small smile touched her lips. "I will." As I watched her walk to her car, I realized that the aftermath of truth is rarely neat or simple. It's messy, painful, unpredictable, but ultimately necessary. Like a forest after a fire, what grows from the ashes may be different from what came before, but it is no less vital, no less alive. Rebecca and I would never go back to who we had been. But maybe, just maybe, we could grow into something stronger, a relationship built on honesty rather than illusion, on acceptance rather than competition, and that would be worth all the pain of getting there. 3 months after we opened the safe deposit box, I stood in Mom's kitchen, our kitchen now, unpacking boxes of dishes while summer rain pattered against the windows. The environmental science department at Oakridge Community College had been delighted to have a researcher with my credentials join their faculty, and I'd officially moved back to my hometown just in time for the fall semester. My phone chimed with a text message. "Rebecca, just finished with my last client. Still okay if I come by around 6? I smiled, typing back. "Of course. Bringing anything? Wine. The good kind, not your cheap stuff." Some things hadn't changed since her return from New York 2.5 months ago. Rebecca and I had been establishing what I thought of as our new normal, a careful, deliberate reconstruction of our relationship as adult sisters who had weathered a significant upheaval together. We weren't living in the house together. Rebecca had kept her apartment downtown, close to her law practice. I had taken over the day-to-day maintenance of Mom's house, though legally it belonged to both of us equally. But each week, we made a point of having dinner together, alternating between her place and mine. It wasn't always easy or comfortable. There were still moments of tension, old patterns that threatened to resurface. But we were trying, and that effort itself represented a profound shift from where we had been. At 6, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Rebecca sheltering under an umbrella, a bottle of Cabernet in one hand, and a manila envelope in the other. "Started pouring just as I got out of the car," she said, shaking water from her umbrella before stepping inside. "Something smells good." "Lasagna," I replied. "Mom's recipe, though not as good as when you make it." She handed me the wine. "This needs to breathe, and I want to show you something." In the living room, Rebecca opened the manila envelope and removed several photographs. These came from Thomas's old friend Martin in New York. He found them in a storage box and thought I might want them. She laid the photos on the coffee table, images of a young Thomas Lawson in his sculpture studio at gallery openings on the streets of Manhattan in the early 1970s. He looked happy, I observed, studying the face that shared so many features with my sister. He was, according to Martin, at least when he wasn't in his depressive phases. Rebecca picked up one photo showing Thomas working on a clay model. "I have his hands, and apparently his temperament, the intensity, the perfectionism." Martin said Thomas would work for days without sleeping when inspiration hit, then crash for a week afterward. I watched her face as she spoke about Thomas, the blend of curiosity, connection, and lingering pain. "Do you wish you had known him?" She considered the question with the thoughtfulness that characterized her approach to everything. "Yes and no. I wish I'd known the truth sooner. I wish I'd had the chance to decide for myself whether to learn about him. But from everything I've discovered, he wasn't equipped to be a father. His mental illness was severe and untreated. He likely would have brought chaos rather than stability into my life." "And Dad? How do you feel about him now?" Rebecca's expression softened. "He chose me. Every day, he chose to be my father, even though he didn't have to be. That means more to me now than it ever did before." Her answer brought tears to my eyes. In all our years of competition and misunderstanding, I'd never appreciated the complexity of Rebecca's experience, how she had intuitively sensed something missing in her origin story and compensated by trying to be perfect, to be worthy of the place she occupied in our family. "I've been seeing a therapist," Rebecca continued, surprising me with her candor. "Working through what all this means for my identity. It's helping." "I'm glad," I said sincerely. She gathered the photos back into the envelope. "I've decided to establish a scholarship at the Art Institute, in Thomas's name, for students with mental health challenges who are pursuing sculpture." The gesture was so quintessentially Rebecca, practical, generous, and designed to create order from chaos. But it was also healing, a way of honoring the complicated legacy she had inherited. "That's wonderful," I told her. "A way of connecting to that part of your heritage while helping others." "Exactly." She glanced at her watch. "Is the lasagna ready?" "I'm starving." As we moved to the kitchen, I marveled at how we had found our way to this new version of sisterhood. We weren't best friends. We probably never would be. Our personalities and interests remained too different for that kind of relationship. But we had achieved something equally valuable: mutual respect, honest communication, and a genuine desire to stay connected despite our differences. Over dinner, Rebecca shared news about her practice, and I told her about my new colleagues at IK, the college. We discussed plans for the house, updates to the bathroom, whether to convert Dad's old study into a guest room. Normal, everyday topics that would have seemed impossible during our fraught week together after Mom's funeral. "I found something else in New York," Rebecca said as we cleared the table. A genetic testing company that specializes in health profiles rather than ancestry. I'm having my DNA analyzed for any markers from Thomas's side that might affect my health. Bipolar disorder has genetic components. I nodded, understanding her practical approach to this new information. Would you want to know if you have those markers? Absolutely, she said without hesitation. Knowledge is power, Ellie. Always. That's what I wish everyone had understood all along. Her words weren't accusatory, simply factual, and she was right. The secrets in our family had been kept with good intentions but had caused harm that truth might have prevented. As Rebecca prepared to leave later that evening, she paused at the door. Next week at my place, I'm trying a new recipe. That Mediterranean fish dish you liked at Carvalho's. Sounds great, I agreed. Need me to bring anything? Just yourself. She hesitated, then added, and maybe that article you mentioned about climate impact on local agriculture. Some of my clients are farmers, and I'd like to understand the issues better. This, too, was new, Rebecca showing interest in my work, seeking to understand what mattered to me. A small gesture that represented a significant shift. After she left, I wandered through the quiet house, touching familiar objects that now held different meanings. Dad's sketches that I'd framed and hung in the hallway, Mom's gardening books that I'd kept on the shelves, the family photographs that now told a more complex story than they once had. This was our new normal. Not perfect, not always comfortable, but honest. A relationship built on truth rather than illusion, on acceptance rather than competition. And that made all the difference. 1 year to the day after Mom's funeral, Rebecca and I stood side by side in Oakridge Cemetery, placing fresh flowers on her grave. The autumn air was crisp, leaves in brilliant shades of red and gold drifting around us as we observed a moment of quiet remembrance. She would be pleased, I think, Rebecca said finally, adjusting the lilies we'd brought, Mom's favorites, to see us here together, to know what's changed between us. I nodded, watching a maple leaf spiral down to rest on the polished granite. She orchestrated it all pretty carefully. She did, Rebecca agreed with a small smile. Always the director, even from beyond. We walked slowly back through the cemetery toward the parking lot, fallen leaves crunching beneath our feet. So much had changed in a year. Rebecca had expanded, her law practice to include family advocacy work. I had settled into my position at the college and was developing a climate resilience program for local communities. We had each carved out our own spaces while finding new ways to connect with each other. I've been thinking about the last year, I said as we reached Rebecca's car. About everything we've learned, everything that's changed. Rebecca leaned against the car door, her expression thoughtful. What stands out to you the most? I considered the question carefully. That truth may be painful, but secrets are ultimately more damaging. Mom and Dad thought they were protecting you by hiding your biological father, but that secret created distances they never intended. And you did the same thing? Rebecca pointed out, but without accusation. When you found Mom's letter. I did, I acknowledged. I made the same mistake they did, thinking I knew what was best for you rather than trusting you to handle the truth. Rebecca nodded. That's been my biggest realization this year. How much of my life was shaped by people making decisions for me based on what they thought I could or couldn't handle. How many of my own choices were reactions to things I sensed but couldn't name. Like your drive to be the perfect Sullivan daughter? I said softly. Exactly. I was trying to earn a place that was already mine, just not in the way I thought. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache with recognition. But I've also learned that biology isn't destiny. My DNA may come partly from Thomas Lawson, but James Sullivan was my father in every way that matters. I smiled. remembering how worried I'd been that the revelation would destroy her relationship with Dad's memory. He would be so proud of how you've handled all of this. Of both of us, Rebecca corrected. The Sullivan stubborn streak lives on in both his daughters. We shared a laugh at that undeniable truth. What about you? I asked. What's been your most important lesson from all of this? Rebecca thought for a moment. That identity isn't fixed. That it's possible to incorporate new truths into your understanding of yourself without losing who you've always been. She met my gaze directly. And that sisterhood is more complex and more valuable than I ever gave it credit for. The simple admission brought unexpected tears to my eyes. After all the years of competition and misunderstanding, hearing Rebecca acknowledge the value of our relationship meant more than I could express. We wasted a lot of time, didn't we? I said. Misunderstanding each other, competing for recognition. I wouldn't call it wasted, Rebecca replied. Complicated, certainly. Unnecessarily difficult at times. But it brought us here, and here isn't such a bad place to be. She was right. The path had been winding and often painful, but we had arrived at a relationship more authentic than anything we'd managed in the past. Coffee? She suggested, checking her watch. I have an hour before my next appointment. I'd like that. As we drove to our favorite local cafe, I reflected on how our relationship had evolved. We weren't carbon copies of each other and never would be. Rebecca remained more structured, more driven by achievement and recognition. I was still more contemplative, more comfortable with ambiguity, but we had learned to value these differences, rather than seeing them as threats or failings. Over coffee, our conversation drifted to everyday matters, a case Rebecca was working on, the garden I was planning for spring, a film we both wanted to see. Normal sister talk, unmarked by the undercurrents of resentment that had once characterized our interactions. Oh, I almost forgot, Rebecca said, reaching into her bag. I found this last week while organizing my files. She handed me a faded photograph I'd never seen before, Mom and Dad at what appeared to be a picnic, each holding one of us as small children. We were all laughing at something off camera, a perfect moment of family joy captured forever. Mom's handwriting on the back says it was taken at Lake Marshall, Rebecca explained. The summer I was 4 and you were 2. I studied the image, struck by the genuine happiness evident on all our faces. We were a real family, weren't we? Despite the secrets, despite the complications, there was real love there. There was, Rebecca agreed softly. And there still is, just in a different form. As we finished our coffee and prepared to part ways, Rebecca to her law office, me to my afternoon class, I realized that was perhaps the most important wisdom we had gained. That love and family could take many forms, that they could evolve and change over time, that they could survive even the most difficult truths if approached with honesty and compassion. Same time next week? Rebecca asked as we stepped outside. My place for dinner? I'll bring dessert, I promised. That chocolate thing you like from Hanson's Bakery. Her smile, genuine without the competitive edge it once held, warmed me more than the coffee had. Perfect. We hugged briefly before heading to our respective cars. It wasn't the dramatic, emotional embrace of a Hallmark movie, but it was real. A genuine expression of the new relationship we had built from the ruins of the old. As I drove to campus, I thought about Mom's final gift to us. Not the house or the financial inheritance, but the opportunity to finally see each other clearly and to build something authentic in place of the misunderstandings that had separated us for so long. Rebecca had once said, "Mom loves me more, not you." Words thrown like weapons in the heat of grief and confusion. Now we both understood the truth. That love isn't a competition, that it doesn't diminish when shared, that it can encompass differences and complexities without losing its essential nature. That was the wisdom we had gained. Hard-won, but invaluable. And it would guide us forward into whatever the future held, as individuals, as sisters, as family in the truest sense of the word. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.